This is Duncan Hunter's seat. He was forced out. He is facing sentencing for campaign violations. Darrell Issa hoping to return as a Republican in Southern California. And then in the Senate in Alabama, a big race to watch where Jeff Sessions, the former Attorney General who stepped down from his Senate seat, hoping to regain his old seat to face Doug Jones in the fall, but a crowded Republican primary field there. Also competitive Democratic primaries in North Carolina and Texas. These are two states where the Democrats hope to flip the Senate in 2020. Again, all of these results available on our website at cspan.org, and we'll be tracking them into the evening. Susan?
Thank you, Steve. The first two events we're waiting for tonight is Tulsi Gabbard in Detroit, and then also Elizabeth Warren also in Detroit. And we'll bring those to you live as they get underway in just a few minutes. Until that time, we are going to take your calls. Before we get started with calls, President Trump is also keeping an eye on the Democrats and their results on this Super Tuesday. Here's what he had to say to reporters just a little while ago.
Well, I think there's no question the establishment, the Democrat establishment, is trying to take it away from Bernie Sanders. There's no question about that in my mind. Now, look, a lot's going to be learned tonight. We'll see how well Biden does. We'll see how well Sanders does. I would have said 2-3 days ago Biden was not looking too good. Now he's looking better. But a lot's going to be done by a certain time tonight. You tell me the time. By, California, we're a little delayed. So probably by 9 or 10 o'clock tonight, we're going to have some big answers.
President Trump in Washington earlier this afternoon. Well, we're going to start calls, and as I mentioned at the outset, we're going to put an emphasis on Democratic calls. We'll take several of those in proportion to calls from independents and Republicans. But we do want Republicans and independents to get in queue because we'd like to hear from you on who you're supporting at this point in the process and why. That's our question for tonight, especially of the Democrats with this thinning field. Who's your candidate and why? We're going to begin with Matt from Miamisburg, Ohio, on the Democrats line. Go ahead, please.
Well, good evening to you all, and thank you so much. So, being from Ohio in Dayton, my candidate, originally before I was leaning toward, since I'm a younger voter, I was leaning toward Bernie Sanders, but it wasn't until the South Carolina result that I've really become more or less with Joe Biden, because it feels like, we know Joe, and Joe is going to fight for the middle of the road, and his moderate positions are a lot more, I think, attainable. I believe that the Senate and the House are just as important, if not more important, than winning back the presidency, because if you don't have a Senate and the House becomes the other side, then we're not going to be able to get things done. So I'm afraid that if we were to elect someone on the socialist, left progressive, and the radical wing, I just don't think that we're going to be able to maintain the gains that we've had in the House and the Senate. So that's why I'm in the middle of the road, and let's go, Joe. 2020, baby.
Matt, let me ask you a question. Where are your own politics? Are you being pragmatic, or are you following your heart here?
In this one, I'm really following my heart on this one, because I think when he talked about his son, kind of his loss, I've had losses in my life, and I really like his policies when he was with Obama, when he was going with guns, and when he was doing, some of the in the economic recessions, how he helped turn that around, and then starting to get kind of pull out of Iraq, and I'm following my gut here. Also I am pragmatic too, but I align more with Joe Biden's moderate positions more than Bernie's. So.
Okay, thank you for your call. Mike is a Democrat in Miami, Florida, actually on the other line. Go ahead, please, Mike. You're on the air.
Yeah, I was just listening to the guy's comments, and the only thing he needs to worry about with Biden really is whether he remembers where the middle of the road is.
and who is your candidate, Mike?
The president.
And why are you a strong supporter of him at this point in his political career?
You know what? If there was any other thing that they had to run on, except for they don't like Donald Trump, okay, I might listen to them. But I know exactly how the president feels, because I got orange hair too.
Next up is Michael, and in Great Neck, New York, Democrat. Who's your candidate, Michael?
My candidate has always been Bernie Sanders. I'm so excited to vote for him in New York.
And tell me why you support him.
I think people will credit Joe Biden with the results of the impeachment. I think that's the reason he came in 5th in Iowa, and he was doing so poorly in the early states, because people will credit the results of the impeachment with him. He couldn't prevent Trump when he was in office. He couldn't stop him during the impeachment trial. Why would the third time be a charm with Joe Biden? I don't understand.
Okay, thank you for your call. Ed O'Keefe at CBS News is already making a projection that in his home state of Vermont, according to his tweet, Bernie Sanders is winning the Vermont primary, and that's a projection from CBS that Joe Biden will be winning the Virginia primary. 2 projections rather than on actual results just a few minutes after the polls have closed. Steve, what do you have for us?
Just along those points, again, this is based on the early exit poll numbers. Peter Baker of the New York Times, Biden has been declared the winner in Virginia. He points out it is the 4th largest of the Super Tuesday contests to be decided tonight. Also from Ryan Zutek of CNN pointing out that the former vice president getting 63% of the African-American vote, Bernie Sanders getting only about 15%, and Michael Bloomberg getting about 10%.
Thank you, Steve. Back to telephone calls. Melissa is a Democrat in Cleveland, Tennessee.
Good evening, guys. My candidate was Pete Buttigieg, but since he's now dropped out, I'm going to support Joe Biden. And if he gets the nomination, I will definitely be voting for Biden.
And what are you looking for from a candidate this year?
Well, actually, I am, strangely enough, what attracts me to Mayor Pete is what attracts me somewhat to Joe, is that I want that kind of uber intelligence going on. I'm tired of 4 years of me feeling like I'm smarter than the president. A president should be smarter than everybody else. He should be the smartest person in the room, and he's not. And I'm tired of feeling that way for 4 years now. And we just need somebody who can walk in and kind of like Barack Obama just say, hey, I've got this, and just go, go from day one. Now, that being said, Bernie Sanders has that intelligence too, but I am a little reluctant because I had parents who grew up during the McCarthy era. And socialism, or being accused of socialism, is not a good thing, especially in this country. And you don't want that. You don't want to be voting for a socialist and then 10, 20 years down the road have a government official say, we found out you voted for a socialist. And, and suddenly you're considered an American and you brought before committees and all that stuff the way you were back in the 50s.
Okay, thank you, Melissa, for your call. We're getting our results tonight from the Associated Press. They are hard results from a race rather than projections, and the Associated Press has now joined CBS in its projected winner in the presidential primary in Virginia with their tweet breaking Joe Biden wins the presidential primary in Virginia that called at just after 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're taking your calls on this Super Tuesday night with 14 states having their primaries today. Of course, the big tickets are in California and in Texas. Next up is a call from Nicholas, who is watching us in Bradenton, Florida, calling on our other line. What are your politics, Nicholas? Nicholas, are you there? Okay, we're going to move on to Dan, who is watching us in Huguenot, New York, also on our other line. Dan, go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to call because I'm really perplexed with all the confusion among the candidates and the leadership. So many of the elected officers in the Democrat Party have been after Donald Trump as far as interference by foreign governments. They're talking about the Ukraine and Russia. All of that was disproven, and yet they want every illegal alien to have the right to vote. That confuses me. If they don't want interference from foreign governments, why is they support illegals from foreign nations voting in our elections?
And who is your candidate, Dan?
Donald J. Trump, all the way.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your call tonight. Next up, Sarah in Rockland, California, Democrat. I presume you voted today. Did you do an early ballot or go to the poll today?
I went to the polls today because I've been off work for a while and have been following the politics through C-SPAN. I'm very upset with my sanctuary state. I'm very upset when I talk to insurance agents that would sign people up for Covered California, that they were also weren't allowed to ask if someone is a registered or a citizen and would sign them up for registration to vote. So, my state is all about the delegates. My candidates don't listen to me. And I voted for the underdog who has been kicked out of the election and all the news station coverage because she was taking on Hillary Clinton. And I didn't hear that Tulsi Gabbard had dropped out like Buttigieg and Klobuchar, so I did vote for the underdog. She's a moderate Democrat that, to me, has social values. She did not take any campaign money, PAC money. She's not supported by the DNC. So to me, I feel like even though I voted my heart, I took a vote away from Bernie Sanders, and that will give a vote to Joe Biden, who has never addressed his son being in Ukraine in 2016 and taking all that dirty money in the corrupt Ukraine, and has never addressed all the corruption that went on in the 2016 election with Hillary Clinton, Fusion GPS, the FISA courts that filed false reports, and when they were taken, and the DNC and all the dirty money in politics. And so I feel like nothing's going to change until this dirty money gets out of politics, because it's all about Black, Latinos, and they don't care about the American Indians, because population-wise, there are not enough votes to make any change. It's just, it's turned into a racket. I honestly don't feel like my vote counts.
Thank you, Sarah, from Rockland, California. Before tonight's results started coming in, here's where the delegate count stood amongst the major candidates. This was through South Carolina on Saturday. Bernie Sanders at 60, Joe Biden at 54, Elizabeth Warren at 8. Michael Bloomberg 0, because today is the first contest he's really been competing in. Tulsi Gabbard, who has been in the race since the beginning, also at 0. 1,991 needed for nomination at the convention this summer. You can see why today is so important. 1,357 delegates at stake today. And they do have a 15% delegate vote threshold. So you are not awarded any delegates unless you've ascertained 15% in that particular state. And if you have less than that, the delegates will be divided among the candidates who have surpassed that 15% bar. We're going to go back to telephone calls. Next up is Richie in Middletown, New York, on our other line. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Everybody talk about Joe Biden's son that he made a lot of money. Trump's kids, they make a lot of money too. What are they talking about? Another thing, now the Democrat, they only started getting up like they did 4 years ago against Sanderson. They did it 4 years ago. They did it now. They lost the election 4 years ago. They're going to lose it again. What's wrong with those people? They don't know what they're doing.
Okay, thank you, Richie. Who is your candidate?
My candidate, it was 4 years ago. It was Sanderson.
And who is it this time?
It's Sanders again. But the last time I voted for Trump, and this time today it started getting up again. Sanders, so I'm going to vote for Trump again.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate you participating tonight. Victor, up next on C-SPAN, Bloomfield, New Jersey, a Democrat. Welcome to C-SPAN. And who is your candidate?
Joe Biden.
And why do you support him?
Honestly, I know the man for many years. I'm what you will describe as a middle center line Democrat. I'm very religious. I like the way this man is very empathetic with people who are suffering and don't have enough things. So I like him. And I also like the fact that he's very smart. And I do like Sanders' policies. I don't like the way that he goes about trying to explain him. This guy, Sanders, reminds me so much of the liar-in-chief that we have in the White House. Remember when somebody was asking him, how are you going to pay for the universal, what was that? Universal
healthcare?
Universal medical coverage for everybody. Oh, don't worry, we're going to have a huge way of paying this, a huge wall. Everybody, I don't understand. I hear people from Florida talking about that they love this guy, the guy Dan even laughing about it. He's a joke. This man is a joke. I also serve in the Army. I'm a veteran from the Army. Believe me, there is nothing better than we have. The only chance that we have to save this country is Joe Biden. I know he needs a little bit of a fire in the belly, and I hope that he will pick that up starting tonight and be as not aggressive. You don't need to be aggressive and nasty the way this man Trump is to prove that you're smart and that you can be a leader. I was in the Army, and I learned to respect leaders. This guy is a joke. Today we have like 24 people dying in Tennessee. He didn't even get a chance to come in front of the cameras and address that. You know what he did? He put a Twitter. So my prayers, I'll send my prayers.
All right, Victor, thank you so much. We're going to go to the Elizabeth Warren event in Detroit at Eastern Market. She's just taking the stage.
Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the streets, the traffic starts jumping with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5. For service and devotion, you would think that I would deserve a better promotion. Want to move ahead, but the boss won't seem to let me. I swear sometimes that man is out to get me.
Hello, Detroit! Wasn't Senator Stephanie Chang just fabulous? My name is Elizabeth Warren, and I'm the woman who's going to beat Donald Trump. I am also going to help take back the Senate and put Mitch McConnell out of a job. So, here we are, Michigan. You've got exactly 1 week until you start voting. As you know, right now, voting is going on in California and Massachusetts, pretty much still all over this country. I know results will still keep coming in through the night, but what I see happening is a lot of folks trying to turn voting into some complicated strategy. You know, pundits, friends, neighbors are all saying you have to second guess yourself on this. They're playing games about prediction and strategy. You know, guess what your neighbors are up to here. But prediction has been a terrible business, and the pundits have gotten it wrong over and over. So here's my advice. I've got some advice that I want to start with tonight. So here's my advice. Cast a vote that will make you proud. Cast a vote from your heart. And vote for the person you think will make the best president of the United States of America. Because I want you to think for a minute about this democracy. You, you are the ones who get to pick the person who will be the next president, and it is an awesome thing. You are going to do it right here in Michigan next week. People are doing it in California right now, and that's what it means to have a democracy. I'm in this race because I believe I will make the best president of the United States of America. And I want to tell you why. I was not born a politician, but I was born a fighter. And I want you to know this. Is this on? Good. I want you to know this. I got to have a loud voice here. I come by this honest. I think that maybe the reason I fought all my life is because I learned this from my mother. I want to tell you a story about me. I grew up in Oklahoma. Okay, we got a few Okies here. I grew up in Oklahoma. I am the baby. I have 3 much older brothers. They all went off and joined the military. I am what used to be called a late in life baby. My mother always just called me the surprise. Yep, my 3 brothers are all retired. They're back in Oklahoma now. To this day, they are referred to as the boys. That's to distinguish them from the surprise. Now, when I was in middle school, all 3 of the boys were gone by then, and it was just my mom and my daddy and me. And my daddy had a heart attack. He pulled through, but he couldn't work for a long, long time. And I still remember the day when we lost the family station wagon. I remember how my mother used to tuck me in at night, and she would always kiss me and give me this big smile, and I knew what was coming next. She'd leave my room, close the door, and then I'd hear her start to cry. She never wanted to cry in front of me, and I knew that. This is when I learned words like mortgage and foreclosure. And one day, I walked into my folks' bedroom, and laid out on the bed was the dress. Now, some of you in this room will know the dress. It's the one that only comes out for weddings, funerals, and graduations. And there, down by the foot of the bed, was my mother. And she had on her slip, and she was in her stocking feet, and she was pacing back and forth. And she was saying, "We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house." She was 50 years old. She had never worked outside the home, and she was terrified. So she looks up and she sees me standing in the doorway. I'm just a kid. And she looks at me, and she looks at that dress, and she looks back at me, and she walks over and she pulls that dress on, she puts on her high heels, and she walks to the Sears, where she gets a full-time minimum wage job answering phones. And that minimum wage job saved our house, and it also saved our family. And that is the first lesson my mother taught me. And that is, no matter how scared you are, no matter how hard it looks, you get out there and you fight for the people you love. Yep. You bet. It's what I believe. It's what I believe. And here's the thing about that story. I've always carried that in my heart. You want to know who I am? There it is. But I'll tell you another thing about that story. That story is a story about my mother. It's a story about millions of people all across this country who do this every single day. But it is also a story about government. Because understand this, when I was a kid, a full-time minimum wage job in America would support a family of 3. It would cover a mortgage, it would pay the utilities, and it would put food on the table. Today, a full-time minimum wage job in America will not keep a mama and a baby out of poverty. That is wrong, and that is why I am in this fight. I'll tell you something else about that. That change did not happen by accident. That change was not the result of gravity. That change happened because of who government works for. When I was a kid, the question asked in Washington for setting the minimum wage is, what does it take a family of 3 to make it in America's middle class? What does it take a family to have something solid they can build on? What does it take a family to be able to just get a toehold in this economy and build something going forward? Today, the question asked in Washington for setting the minimum wage is what will maximize the profits of giant multinational corporations. Well, I don't want a government that works for giant multinational corporations. I want one that works for our families. And I got a plan for that. In fact, I got a lot of plans for that. So I want to tell you just a little story. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff. I just want to tell you a little story about what it means to get in a fight. So in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, I was watching what was happening. I was studying families that go broke. And what I was starting to see over and over were people who were getting cheated on mortgages, that they had their own homes already. And someone would come and sell them a mortgage to refinance their home, and by golly, refinance them right out of it. And the banks were making more and more money, and more families were getting hurt. They started out by targeting communities of color, African American homeowners, Latinx homeowners. They went after seniors. And I started ringing alarm bells everywhere I could. We got a real problem over here. And here's what I discovered. Nobody wanted to hear it. When your ears are stuffed with money, it's hard to hear. So the banks kept on selling those mortgages, and the regulators just looked the other way. The regulators were so deep in the pocket of the banks, they couldn't even hear what was going on. And sure enough, economy crashed in 2008. We just loaded up on that much debt, brought it down, but I hope you all feel better. The banks got bailed out. Millions of families got left behind. Families right here in Detroit got left behind. Millions of people lost their jobs. Millions of people saw their pension funds shrink. Over and over, this pain was felt by families all across this country. So I decided at this point, wait a minute, we're going to make it through this crisis. There's going to be financial reform. By golly, this financial reform is going to have some protection to make sure that we never wreck this economy again with a bunch of banks cheating people. So I had this idea for an agency, right? Man, that sounds sexy. So I had this idea for this agency, and the basic idea is the same as the idea behind the safety. We have Consumer Product Safety Commission. You can't sell a toaster in America that has a 1 in 5 chance of burning down your house. You shouldn't be able to sell a mortgage that has a 1 in 5 chance, which these did, of costing a family their home. So that's the basic idea. And I wanted an agency. I don't want a single law. I wanted an agency because I knew the banks will rework these things. They'll give it another name. They'll figure out how to rewire it. So I wanted an agency that would have one job, just to be on the side of families, to make sure they don't get cheated on, let's make it all of it, mortgages, credit cards, payday loans, student loans. You don't get cheated on financial products. So that's the basic idea. So I go to Washington. Now, remember, I'm not in elected office. That's not my job. I'm a full-time teacher and researcher. Let's hear it for the nerds. Yes. So I go to Washington, and basically I knock on doors. Anybody who'll talk to me, Democrat, Republican, I don't care. I'm just trying to pitch the idea for this agency. We're in a crisis. We're going to rewrite the laws. Let's get this agency in it. And here's what happened. Basically, I started getting the same two answers from everybody. This just really knocked me over. And the first answer was, huh. That's actually a pretty good idea. You could make a real difference. That's structural change. That would actually make a difference in the market. And the second half to the answer was, don't even try. You'll be up against the banks. You'll be up against Wall Street. You'll be up against all of the Republicans, and shoot, you'll be up against half the Democrats on this. You will never get it done. Now, I get it. So I heard this and I thought, I get it. Big structural change is hard, but it is the right thing to do. So we got in this fight and took on the big banks. They were spending more than $1 million a day for nearly a year, just trying to fight back against this and the other financial reforms. But boy, this was the heart of it. They were out there. We fought the Republicans. We fought them all. But we built the coalitions. And in 2010, Barack Obama signed that agency into law. Dang. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. That little agency has now forced the banks to return more than $12 billion directly to people they cheated. So I take away two lessons from that. The first is you don't get what you don't fight for. I am in this fight. And the second, and this is really important, after 40 years of Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economics, the second, I see you've heard of Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economics. Can we just all stop and say it has been a monumental failure for American families? But the second lesson I learned about this agency, as we built this agency, is we can make government work for the people. And that's what this agency has done. And that's why being here with you tonight is about two things for me. It's about the fight, but it's also about the hope. It's about what we will be able to do together. So that's why I'm here. Let's take some questions and do this. Who have we got? Let's do this. Okay. Let's do some questions. Let's do some questions. Who's got questions tonight? Where are our questions? Over here? No, where are our questions? We drew these early. Oh, everybody's pointing. Good. Okay. Oh, here we go. Hi.
Okay, perfect. Hi. My name's Andrew Priest. I'm a middle school teacher.
Hey, Andrew.
Thank you. At a lovely public school in the city of Detroit. I have a million questions to ask, but I'll stick to one.
Okay.
Many people know that schools are underfunded, but I don't often hear people talk about more equitable funding.
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready. Let me do this, Andrew.
Could you talk to us about how you will make school funding more equitable for students, no matter where they live?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Andrew. Okay. So look, here's the deal. I tried to skip over too much, but I got to tell you all, I have known what I wanted to be since second grade. Yeah, I know some of you in the back didn't decide until what, like fourth grade? fifth grade way in the back. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Since second grade, I have wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for our public school teachers? That's it. And I just want you all to know, I started early. I used to line my dollies up and teach school. I had a reputation for being tough but fair. It's all I ever wanted. I had a very bumpy path to get there, but I made it. I was a special education teacher. Now, I love that work. We have public school teachers in here. I'm gonna need you to back me up on this, okay? But here's the thing. It's not a job, it is a calling. I had 4 to 6-year-olds in special education. I love this work. I would probably still be doing this work today, but at the end of my very first year in teaching, I was visibly pregnant, and the principal did what principals did in those days, wished me luck and hired someone else for the job. And that's how I ended up going to law school and then right back into teaching. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. I truly believe that if we're going to build a future in America, look, roads and bridges are powerfully important. I get it. I get all the things we need to do to produce an infrastructure so that we've got opportunity. But boy, we've got to invest in the education of all of our children. So here's my plan for that. It's time for a wealth tax in America. Yes. Oh, you already know. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page here. This is a 2-cent tax on fortunes above $50 million. Your first $50 million, free and clear. I see a guy in the back. This woman is not unreasonable. But on your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. 2 cents on every dollar. After that, you hit $1 billion, you got to pitch in a couple of pennies more. That's the basic idea. And just so everybody's tracking on this, anybody in here own a home or grow up in a family that owned a home? Yeah, well, you guys have been paying a wealth tax. It's just called a property tax. And all I'm saying is for the bazillionaires, how about if we include not just the real estate, but also the stock portfolio, the diamonds, the Rembrandt, and the yacht? That's the basic idea. Now, you may have heard there are some billionaires who don't like this. One went on TV and cried. It was so sad. Another ran for president. Guess he thought it would be cheaper than a wealth tax. But their argument is, look, I worked hard, I stayed up late, I did this all the time, I had a great idea. You shouldn't punish me. And I said, oh, wait, you made a big fortune here in America, good for you. Good for you. I think that's great, but here's the deal. I guarantee that if you built a fortune here in America, you built it at least in part using workers all of us help pay to educate. Yep. Yeah. You built it at least in part getting your goods to market on roads and bridges all of us help pay to build. You built it at least in part protected by police and firefighters all of us help pay the salaries for. And we're Americans. We love doing this. We want to make these investments in opportunity. All we're saying is when you make it big, I mean really big, I mean top 0.1% big. Pitch in 2 cents so everybody else gets a chance to make it. Because now we get to your question. What can we do with 2 cents? And here's where I want to start. I want to expand how we think of public education. With 2 cents, We can provide universal child care and universal early childhood education for every child in this country, 0 to 5. Universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. And we can stop exploiting the people, largely African-American women and Latinas who do this work. We can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in America. And that starts the answer, because that's equal funding for every one of our children. Goes straight to our communities, comes straight here to Detroit. But there's more. We can make an historic investment in public education. That 2 cents will do all that for our babies, plus an $800 billion federal investment in all of our public schools. Let's lift it up. And when you ask me about equalizing, that plan quadruples the funding for Title I schools. That's how we level this out. And one more, you'll hear this from the heart of a special education teacher. For the first time in history, we will fully fund IDEA, so every child with a disability will get the education that child deserves. It is time in America to say that investing in our children is not just a local obligation, not just a state obligation. It is the obligation of a nation that wants to build a future. So there's some more parts to this plan, because it turns out 2 cents on that top 1/10 of 1% produces a lot of money. I'll just mention, we can also do post-high school education, technical school, 2-year college, 4-year college, tuition free. We can put $50 billion into our historically black colleges and universities. Same 2 cents. And just one more thing. We can cancel student loan debt for $43 million. $0.02. Okay, good. I love that question. Okay, who's next? Who's next? Hi. Hi. Tell me your name.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Seifert.
Hi, Yvonne.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, too.
I want to thank you for your campaign, which has been amazing as a woman to see your spirit. And the way you handle all the misogyny thrown at you, it's pretty badass. My question is, with Trump, our prestige, our reputation, our relationships around the world have really suffered. Yep. And I'm wondering, what will you do to go about repairing those relationships and restoring our reputation?
Good. So thank you for the question, and I like the way you frame it. And, you know, the way I see it, it is the job of the President of the United States to keep America safe. And part of that is that we need a strong military. As I said, all 3 of my brothers served. It's important to support our military. We have the finest military in the world. And they have committed to make any sacrifice for us. Their families sacrifice for us. But that means that we have a sacred obligation to them not to send our military to try to solve problems that can't be solved militarily. That's step 1. So that means we need to look at all the tools in the toolbox when we think internationally. Donald Trump has stripped down the State Department, and this is just dumb. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to describe it. Our State Department, These are the people who are our eyes and ears around the world. They represent America. They know the local culture. They know the local history. They know the local politics. They tell us in advance where there's trouble and what we need to focus on. And we have just decimated what's going on at the State Department. So one of the first things I will do as president is I will bring the State Department back up to full staff. We just got to support our State Department. Third part, and I'll just mention briefly, are our economic tools. We need a strong economy here at home that doesn't just work for a thin slice at the top, doesn't just work for 5 giant banks. We have an economy that we build from the grassroots up that puts us in a much stronger position to work around the world with the rest of the nations. Fourth part I want to mention, the importance of allies. You know, I know this is going to seem really tough, but I think we ought to know the difference between our friends and the people who would do us harm, and we ought to treat our friends better than the people who would do us harm. I don't think we ought to cozy up to dictators. And I don't think we ought to cut and run on our allies and abandon them. So much of that, working with our allies, is going to go a long way, but I got to mention one more. When you think about what we try to accomplish internationally and the importance of working with our allies, we also have to remember that leadership happens by example. And what Donald Trump has been doing down at our border has not only been shameful to us as a people, it has put us in a terrible position around the world. The world looks at what happens at our border, and they say the United States has lost moral authority, has lost leadership. So understand this. I will not take away children from their families. I will not lock up children in cages. I will close for-profit detention centers. And I will work every single day to make sure that this country is living its values. I will do my best as president to make you proud of the United States of America in all of our dealings. Good. Gotta do this. Good. Thank you. I like that. We're gonna do this. You guys are so good. Thank you. Oh. Okay. We got one more question over here. Oh my gosh.
That was so weird. I'm so sorry.
No.
So I think we have time for 2 more questions.
2 more questions.
So I'm going to pull them, and we're going to do the same thing. This is Willa. And so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to read the number. You're going to yell persist, and you're going to make it over here, right? Okay.
Okay. Right over here. Okay.
99927
Whoa!
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, come on over.
Did we find it? Okay.
Yeah, somebody yelled bingo. Do not remove the beans from your card yet. We will verify that number.
All right, 9927243.
Was there one? Oh, okay. That's no. 243.
Here, we
got it? Yep. We got it? All right. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Willa. All right. Good. Okay. So we're going to do some more questions. Okay. Hi. Hi.
Hello, my name is Dion Freeman. I'm from Flint, Michigan. Good to have you here.
Woohoo.
I have a question from the city of Flint. and for the state of Michigan.
Yep.
We are surrounded by water, and we are a natural water resource for America. Nestle Company is chipping us out of our natural resources. And before we became an industrialized state, we were all about agriculture.
Yep.
What are you going to do to help preserve our natural resources and get back water, clean water, back as a natural human right? Because
all right,
we're still paying for water that we cannot use in Flint, Michigan.
So, thank you for the question. Water is life. And so we need to protect our water. But here's the thing to understand, because here's how I hear that question. What I really hear that question as is, look what happens when government works for giant corporations instead of working for the rest of us. Because this isn't about a problem with the water that's occurred naturally, right? This is about a giant corporation that's come in and said, I can boost profits by sucking it all up for myself and then discharging my filth, right? And that's making poor decisions for the people. So here's the question. Why does the government let them do that? Money talks, right? Money talks. No, it's not just greed. It is greed. Oh, yeah. But it's, think about it, it's corruption. It's the greed may not change. The question is, our government is the part that's supposed to be on our side. Let me just think about how this works over and over and over. We have a government that works great for giant drug companies, just not for people trying to get a prescription filled. It works great for people who want to make money by investing in private prisons and private detention centers, just not for the human beings whose lives are torn apart by those places. We have a government that works great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who see climate change bearing down upon us. And whether it's on water resources or on pollution, whether it's on permitting these factories to be located over and over and over in communities of color, where they destroy the water, they destroy the air, whatever it is, understand this. When a government works great for those with money, and it's not working so well for anyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple. And whatever issue brought you here tonight, whether it's the water, whether it's gun violence, whether it's health care, whether it's student loans, whether it's immigration, if there is a decision to be made in Washington, I guarantee it has been influenced by money. It has been shaped by money. It has had exceptions carved out by money. Most of it never even makes a headline, just a little change year by year by year, until this whole country, this whole economy, this whole democracy works for a handful at the top and leaves everyone else behind. So for me, we have to make a first priority of not just backing up on the money issue and say, oh, we can't do anything, or nibbling around the edges. It is time for an anti-corruption bill in Washington. We got to get on our front foot and fight back. So here's the good news. I have the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. Here's the bad news. We need the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. So the importance of this is to get our government on our side. So they're regulating on our side in your specific case. But let me just give you a sample of what's in this anti-corruption plan. How about we start with end lobbying as we know it? Block the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. Block the revolving door between the big polluters and the EPA. We gotta do this. Block the revolving door between the big drug companies and the FDA. I could do these all night long. I'm going to mention just one more. You really want to hose out some corruption in Washington? Make everyone who runs for public office put their tax returns online. So this is it. This is a democracy. We got this chance in 2020 to beat back the corruption, and that means put our government on our side. That's how we're going to fix this problem. Thank you. Good. Oh, I love you guys. We're going to do this. Yes, we're going to do this. Okay.
All right, Senator.
Another question. We have another one?
We have time for one last question.
One last question. Yep. Okay, hi. Who we got?
Hi. My name is Brianna.
Hi, Brianna.
Hi. So I don't know if you noticed on your drive here, but we have some pretty bad roads here in Michigan. So do you have a plan to invest in our infrastructure or our roads?
And you're not going to be surprised by this. The answer is, of course I have a plan for this. But you know, instead of doing a lot of detail on this, you can look, and I hope anybody does. Go to ElizabethWarren.com. You can kind of see all the pieces here. But you've got what the music is now, right? The heart of this is two parts. We got to ask those at the top to pay a little more. I use the 2-cent wealth tax, but it's more than this. Giant corporations like Amazon and Eli Lilly and Halliburton reported billions of dollars in profits last year and paid zero in taxes. That is not right. We have to ask those at the top to pay a little more. That's how we have enough money for infrastructure. And the second part is what we were just talking about. We have got to be willing to pick up our regulatory tools and use them on behalf of the people. Trickle-down economics, we were talking about it a minute ago. Trickle-down economics, just think about it this way. From 1980 basically forward, what has been the principle? How does it work? It's helped the rich and powerful get richer and more powerful. And how do you do that? You cut taxes for those at the top. That's how they get richer. And you cut regulations. That's how they get more powerful. It is time for us in America to say trickle-down economics has been a failure. We're going to build this economy from the grassroots up, and we're going to save our democracy. For me, that's what this is about. So thank you. Lots of money for this. Let me wrap this up by saying a serious note here, because this is serious. We've now had 3 years of Donald Trump. I know, but it's more than booing. You know, there are a lot of people across this country who are afraid. They are afraid for their families. They are afraid for their neighbors. They are afraid for the children locked up in cages at our border. They are afraid for children on lockdown in our public schools. They are afraid. They are afraid for women. They're afraid for people of color. They are afraid for LGBTQ people. They are afraid for immigrants, all of whose rights are going to be up for grabs in this United States Supreme Court. They are afraid for our nation, and they are afraid for our survival of our planet. And here's the thing. The danger is real. Our democracy, our very future, hangs in the balance. And so this is a decision each and every one of you is going to have to make. When there is this much danger, do you decide to kind of get a little timid, back up, crouch down a little, or do you decide to fight back? Me, I'm in this because I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back. I'm fighting back. You bet I am. Fighting back is is an act of patriotism. Think of it this way. Think of it this way. We fought back against a king to form this country. We fought back against the scourge of slavery to save this union. We fought back against a Great Depression to rebuild our economy. And we fought back against the rise of fascism to protect our democracy. Americans are at our best. When we see big problems, we call them out and we fight back. And that's why I'm in this fight. So, look, you probably figured out by now that I am not running a campaign that has been shaped by a bunch of consultants. I also don't have a bunch of proposals that have been carefully designed not to offend big donors. I passed that stop sign a long, long time ago. I am fighting this campaign based on a lifetime of fighting for working families. I am fighting this campaign from the heart because I believe in you. And I believe in the America that we can build together. An America where every single person has value. An America where every single child is worth investing in. An America where in our democracy, it's people, not money, that is the most important part. I believe in that America, and I can see that America. And if you think that America is possible, and you think that America is worth fighting for, then I'm asking you, get in this fight. Get in this fight. Vote for me, but more. But more, go to ElizabethWarren.com, volunteer an hour to spend on the phones, do some door knocking, talk to your neighbors, talk to people in front of you in line at the grocery store, but get in this fight, because understand this is the moment in history that we have been called to. And this moment will not come our way again. This is our moment to choose hope over fear. This is our moment to choose courage over cynicism. This is our moment to dream big, fight hard, and win.
It's time to put courage over cynicism. It's time to put hope over fear. And guess what else it's time for? No, it's time to get to work. To be honest, you all know what today is. Today is Super Tuesday. There are
And we're going to leave that Elizabeth Warren event in Detroit, Michigan, and the senator looking ahead to next Tuesday's contest with 6 states there and 352 delegates. And while she's been talking, polls have closed in a number of other states and results are starting to come in. Let me give you just a quick overview of what's been happening so far. Really, it's essentially been a two-person contest with between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders reaching that 15% threshold of viability in most states. Mr. Bloomberg, Mayor Bloomberg, only reaching viability so far in one state North Carolina, that he's contested in. But Steve Scully is going to give us an update on what we know so far, and then we'll come back and take some more of your calls. Thanks for being with us on Super Tuesday 2020.
And Susan, a lot to talk about already. Based on the exit poll numbers, Alabama, another win for former Vice President Joe Biden. So the coalition in the South is clearly holding for the former Vice President. Let's look at the actual numbers, though, where we have the AP figures beginning in North Carolina, a state that the former Vice President has won with about 2% reporting, but Joe Biden now at nearly 37%, followed by Senator Bernie Sanders at 23.6%. Michael Bloomberg, who did cross the threshold right now with a 2% reporting at 16%. Again, these are early numbers. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who we saw just a moment ago, at about 10.5%. There's also a governor's primary race in North Carolina, but Roy Cooper, who is seeking a second term, so far easily ahead over his Democratic challenger, Ernest Reeves. And there is a Democratic Senate primary in North Carolina as well. Cal Cunningham, who is trying to vie to compete against Tom Tillis, the Republican senator in that state, North Carolina, a key state for Democrats and Republicans to determine control of the U.S. Senate beyond 2020. In other primary states where the results are coming in, again, we should point out these are all AP numbers. We can go to Virginia, which was called just shortly after 7 p.m. Eastern time, and now with 81% of the vote now in. Joe Biden easily the winner with just over 54% of the vote. Senator Bernie Sanders a distant second, about half of that amount at 23%, followed by Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg. And finally in Vermont, the home state of Senator Bernie Sanders, he easily won that state with nearly 52% of the vote. This has about 22% reporting in Vermont. Former Vice President Joe Biden coming in second with about 7,400 votes. That translates to 22%. Followed by Senator Warren at 11.9% and Michael Bloomberg just under 10%. And again, Susan, as you said earlier, all of these numbers and all of the candidate events, they're all on the website at cspan.org.
Thank you, Steve. And results are also coming in from Massachusetts, home state to Elizabeth Warren and neighboring state to Bernie Sanders. David Wasserman of Cook Political Report tweets this: more bad news for Sanders. He tweets, Massachusetts is too early to call between Sanders and Biden. Early numbers do have Elizabeth Warren at viability. She's at 16% in these early numbers. Again, that threshold is 15. In these early reporting, Bernie Sanders has 26 to Joe Biden's 39. Home state for Senator Warren, and right next door for Bernie Sanders. We're going to take some more calls as we are watching results come in and waiting for next events. Our next event coming up will be Michael Bloomberg, and we will bring you that live as he gets underway this evening to address his supporters. He is in West Palm Beach, Florida. And as we wait for that to get underway, let's listen to some of your comments. Lori is in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Lori, you've been hanging on the line for a long time. Thanks for that. Democrat, who's your candidate? Lori, are you there? Okay, spoke too soon. Lori left us. So let's move on to Janet in Arlington, Texas on the other line. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, this is Janet. Thank you for taking my call. I've got a few very important points that I would like to make. I have been hacked by the worst hackers in Arlington, Texas, and in Oklahoma, where my original family is. And I have been hacked most all of my life through the computers, through my Social Security, and that is my whole family.
Well, Janet, how does this play into the presidential race?
And my cell phone number. And they've even had the nerve so much as to come in this house on numerous occasions and steal my tax forms.
Okay, Janet, sorry, I'm going to move on because it's taken us off topic with the presidential race. Lisa is in Indianapolis on this Super Tuesday evening. Go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I actually called on the Democratic line because I could get through, but I'm an independent. I'll just go ahead and declare that I was for Pete. I'm a little bit biased. But now, since Indiana's primary is in May, you know, at that point, we know we're not really that relevant, so it's sort of a blue no matter who. But I would love to talk about why, as an independent, I'm taking that view, if that's okay with you.
Okay. Go ahead.
So thank you. Thank you. I was actually on hold for a long time listening to Senator Warren. That actually kind of cooled my initial response to the first callers who identified as Trump supporters or quote unquote other. So I have to give her a lot of credit for my internal conference with my better angels, but it really hasn't dimmed my just bewilderment at how so many of my neighbors and fellow Americans could be so ramped up by revenge for something that I don't really understand what happened. And it just seems to me like so many people are excited about burning down their own house so that their more liberal neighbor can choke on the smoke for 15 minutes. That's the metaphor that I always use. So I guess if anybody else is calling in tonight on the Republican/other line, what I would like to say is, since I'm voting blue no matter who, if what you're voting for is better than some kind of cultural cruelty, then, I mean, convince me otherwise. Just tell me the merits of your cause and give me some hope. Tell me what you and Trump envision for all your neighbors, and that includes me and people of all races, religions, genders, identities, orientations, origins, because if all you have is joy and trolling and revenge that marginalized people now live with a little more uncertainty, then you're going to fail, and you should.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa, for your call. Next up is Steve in Anaheim, and also calling on our other line for Republicans, Independents, and Undecideds.
Hello.
Hey, Steve, you're on the air. Welcome.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I could fry an egg on this phone. I've been on hold for so long.
Oh, thanks for your patience.
Well, anyway, I'm not going to get into the contrarian argument here. Basically, I just want to tell you what's going on out here. Since we are, moved our polling or our election up to the Super Tuesday this year for the first time, some of the polling stations my normal polling station was closed, and I had to go online to find out where it was open, which was a little bit of a hassle, but it went through pretty easily as far as their new machines and stuff. The only thing that kind of bothers me is like the old polling machines had everybody's language in the computer, and these you have to have a paper ballot that are separately printed to whoever's language you're speaking to. Now we've got like 2,000 different dialects out here, so that's going to bring up the cost of running elections a little more expensive than it used to be. But as far as anything else went, it actually went pretty smoothly.
And who's your candidate, Steve?
Well, my candidate, I'll probably, there's a toss-up of whether I'm going to vote for Trump or Sanders, but my candidate actually was Andrew Yang, because he was the only one that looked like he had any foresight on what the future economy is going to turn to in this country.
Okay, thanks for your call tonight, and thanks again for waiting for such a long time. We're going to return to colleague Steve Scully for results from Alabama and Massachusetts.
And Susan, as you mentioned, an eye on the Michigan primary, which is why Tulsi Gabbard is there tonight. Also, Senator Elizabeth Warren in Detroit. She is now third, though, in her home state of Massachusetts. Let's look at the returns from Massachusetts, where former Vice President Joe Biden, again, a very small amount, only 1% being reported from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but Joe Biden at 34%. Senator Sanders coming in second at 25.5%. And then Senator Warren at 22.3%. Michael Bloomberg coming in a distant fourth. Again, 15% is the key threshold when it comes to delegates. We'll keep a close eye on what happens in Massachusetts and how this might impact Senator Warren's path ahead to the nomination. Also, as we said, in Alabama, where the early numbers show former Vice President Joe Biden now being declared the winner by the Associated Press based on the exit poll numbers, where Michael Bloomberg coming in second at just under 30%. So this is the closest he has come so far with the numbers in 14 states. And the early reporting from the East Coast, Senator Sanders crossing the threshold so far at 15.9%, and Senator Warren a distant fourth at 4%. Again, early numbers from Alabama, but the former vice president picking up yet another win on this Super Tuesday evening. Susan?
Thanks very much. American Samoa is holding its primary today and has 12 delegates at stake. As some people have mentioned on Twitter, it becomes important if the convention ends up being close contest. Michael Bloomberg is the winner there with 49% so far. Tulsi Gabbard coming in second, and what you might not know is that is her birthplace. One of the other interesting facts about American Samoa is that Michael Bloomberg actually had 7 staff persons on the ground working American Samoa for this primary. And related to that, here is Jennifer Epstein tweeting about the next debate amid speculation that Tulsi Gabbard could qualify for the March 15th debate after winning 1 delegate in American Samoa. DNC's Wachatiel Inaosa says, of course, the threshold will go up. By then, almost 2,000 delegates will be allocated and, quote, the threshold will reflect where we are in the race, as it always has. We're going to go back to calls while we're waiting for our next candidate event on this Super Tuesday. Jim is in Caliente, California, on our other line. Who's your candidate, Jim?
Well, I am a registered Republican, and I did vote for Trump in the primary, but I'll wait and see in the general election. But I would probably, it doesn't really make any difference here in California. It's going to go overwhelmingly Democratic, I think, regardless of who's
And how was your experience at the polls today? We had another California caller that things went pretty well for. Did you have the same experience?
Well, you know, where I live, and much of Kern County is like this, and much of California is like this, we only have absentee ballots.
Oh, okay.
We don't have, where I live, I mean, you can go and vote in a polling place if you want, but and I like that. I prefer to vote in polling places, but the absentee ballots come in, and it is pretty easy. My problem with that whole concept is that you know you're voting early, even if it's only 2 or 3 days. And again, you can't really change. My wife voted for a candidate. She's a Democrat, and the candidate dropped out. So she would have probably changed her vote if she voted today, but.
So how are things across the dinner table in your household with you two being in different places?
Oh, we're very quiet. We don't talk about politics very much.
So what's most important to you in this election year?
I think stability, and I'm not sure who the best candidate to provide. You know, Biden at least I think has a lot of stability. My problem with actually all of the candidates, or virtually all of the candidates, including Trump, they're too old. I'm in my 70s, so I'm not a young guy saying this. I think we need younger people, and this time around in the Democrats, we had a lot of younger people, and none of them have surfaced. I mean, they've all.
All right, thank you so much for calling in tonight, Jim. Caliente, California. At about 7 minutes from now, one more state will be added to the roster of results. Arkansas, with 31 delegates, closes at 8:30 Eastern Time. And then at 9 o'clock, we pick up the big state of Texas with 228 Democratic delegates, along with Colorado, Minnesota. So some big states coming up in just a short amount of time, along with our event with Michael Bloomberg, which will be starting soon. Next up is the call from Ed in Rockford, Michigan, a Democrat. You're on the air, Ed. Welcome.
Yes. Hello. I'm a little bit nervous, so I'll try to steady myself, but I'm for Bernie Sanders. And the reasons is that he's financed with little people's donation. I gave $150 so far for his campaign, and I don't have that kind of money. What you're going to see is, I think Biden will start picking up a lot of campaign money that he hasn't received from corporate donations and so forth. So he won't get that many small donations. And that's a real critical thing, because once the election is over with, he becomes president, these corporations will come to them after the election and ask for this and that and so forth. So, I'll tell you, I got pre-existing conditions. And, Trump is promising we can keep, pre-existing conditions. What's going to happen is we might keep that, but the insurance companies will be able to increase the prices. So if you have diabetes and so forth, I'm a 75-year-old guy, and, Medicare is the way to go.
Okay, Ed. Thanks. I'm going to jump in at that point, calling us from Rockford, Michigan. Appreciate it. Journalist Deepa Shivaram has tweeted this, just following up to the Warren campaign event. She writes, caught Warren leaving her Detroit event and getting into her car. Asked if she doesn't win a state tonight, will she drop out tomorrow? She didn't respond. Well, as I mentioned, our next event is with Michael Bloomberg in West Palm, Florida. And we're going to go to that now. And that is Judge Judy doing the introduction. She's been speaking for a little bit, but let's listen in, and then we'll watch Michael Bloomberg after her.
This is the problem. I want to fix it, and he listens to them. That's what he will do for us. We have to make sure it happens, because if we don't, the rancor in this country will rip us apart. So, for me, it is a joy, and at my stage in life, I have so few of those. It is a joy and a thrill for me to introduce a man who I respect, who I admire, and I hope will inhabit 1600 in 2021, Mike Bloomberg.
What a crowd. Thank you all for coming. Judy and I were just going to sit home tonight, her at her home, I at mine, watch a little television, have a drink or two. But I do want to thank Judge Judy. Isn't she amazing? And also a big thanks to all the elected officials and Florida leaders supporting our campaign, including Mayors Manny Diaz, Phil Levine, Bob Buckhorn, Keith James, and Congress members Ted Deutsch and Stephanie Murphy. Let's hear it for them. But unlike the president, I didn't come here to golf. Or to reveal classified information to Mar-a-Lago members. I came here because winning in November starts with Florida. And if I'm the nominee, let me make you this promise. We will beat Donald Trump here in Florida and in swing states around the country. Now, tonight the polls are still open in a number of Super Tuesday states. And as the results come in, here's what is clear. No matter how many delegates we win tonight, we have done something no one else thought was possible. In just 3 months, we've gone from 1% of the polls to being a contender for the Democratic nomination for president. Enthusiasm they don't lack. All across America, I've been talking with voters, and my message is simple. I am running to beat Donald Trump. And to start rebuilding our country and to start getting things done. And I mean big, important things like stopping gun violence and fighting climate change and finally achieving affordable health coverage for all Americans. This is a campaign for change, a campaign for sanity, for honesty, a campaign for inclusion, compassion, competence, and a campaign for human decency. And this is a campaign to bring our country back together and put the United back in the United States of America. That's the message I've been delivering not only to Democrats, but also to swing voters who will actually decide who will be our next president. And tonight we proved something very important. We proved we can win the voters who will decide the general election. And isn't that what this is all about? Now, while my fellow candidates spent a whole year focusing on the first 4 states, I was out campaigning against Donald Trump in the states where the election will actually be decided, like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pittsburgh and Ohio and North Carolina and, of course, Florida. President Obama proved that a Democrat can win all of those states, but in 2016, we lost them all. Well, I'm running to win them back. And together, we're going to get it done. Now, we all know Trump's strategy: attack Democrats, make their plans look unrealistic, unaffordable, and undoable. That won't work against us. Our plans are sensible, workable, and achievable, and we have the record and the resources to defeat Trump in swing states the Democrats lost in 2016, like Florida. I know we can do it, and you know who else knows it? Donald Trump. And that's why he keeps attacking us on Twitter. Today, he sent a tweet out urging people not to vote for us. Gee, I wonder why. Clearly, Trump is scared stiff of facing us, and for good reason. In every campaign I ran for mayor, we built a broad coalition that brought Democrats and independents and moderate Republicans together. Donald Trump the other day called me short. I said, Donald, where I come from, we measure people from the neck up. That's how we're going to beat Donald Trump. I believe we need a leader who is ready to be commander-in-chief, not college debater-in-chief. So if you want someone who talks turkey and who has a record of accomplishment on all the big issues facing our country and who has the resources to beat Trump, I'm your guy. And while Trump tweets, I follow facts, respect data, and tell the truth. My whole career, I have been a doer, and I believe we need less talk, less partisanship, less division, less tweeting. In fact, how about no tweeting from the Oval Office ever again? Now, you've all heard our campaign slogan, Mike will get it done. Well, let me tell you what the it is. It means winning this November and sending Donald Trump back to Mar-a-Lago permanently. But that's just the beginning, because getting it done means finally providing health insurance to every American who lacks it. Getting it done means passing common sense gun safety laws that protect our children and communities. Getting it done means making America a global leader in the fight against climate change. Getting it done means creating good jobs with higher wages. Getting it done means addressing discrimination and inequality. Getting it done means creating a path to citizenship and finally fixing our broken immigration system. And getting it done means protecting a woman's right to choose. Our campaign is a fight for America's ideals and values. It's a fight to build a better future for everyone, not to bring back a past that left so many out. It's a fight we cannot afford to lose. So I need your help and I need your vote. And when you talk to your friends and families, thank you, just tell them. If you want quality health insurance for everyone, not just empty promises, if you want to combat inequality with fairer taxes and better jobs, if you support my commitment to public education, no matter what zip code you live in, if you share my belief for opportunity for all and not just for a few, if you are ready to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, and if you are ready to clean out the Oval Office and get things done, then welcome to Bloomberg 2020. Thank you.
Imagination, love it. Tribeca, right next to the narrow, but I'll be hood forever. I'm the new Sinatra, and since I made it here, I can make it anywhere. Yeah, they love me everywhere. I used to cop in Harlem, all of my Dominicanos right there up on Broadway. Pulled me back to that McDonald's, took it to my stash spot, 560 State Street. Catch me in the kitchen like a sinner's whipping pastry. Cruising down A Street, off-white Lexus, driving so slow, but BK is from Texas. Me, I'm out that Bed-Stuy, home of that boy Biggie. Now I live on Billboard, and I brought my boys with me. Say what up to Tata, still sipping my top. Sitting courtside, Knicks and Nets give me high five. I be spiked out, I can trip a referee. Tell by my attitude that I'm most definitely from. With OG, got a Yankee dream. That made the Yankee hat more famous than a Yankee kid. You should know I bleed blue, but I ain't a crypto. But I got a gang and walking with my click though. Welcome to the melting pot. Corners where we selling Africa been bought home of the hip hop. Yellow cap, gypsy cap, dollar cap, holla back. For foreigners it ain't fair, they act like they forgot how to act. 8 million stories out there in the naked city. It's a pity half of y'all won't make it. Me, I got a plug special, but I got it made. If Jesus paying LeBron, I'm paying Dwayne Wade. 3 dice zero, 3 card Marley. Labor Day parade, rest in peace, Bob Marley. Statue of Liberty, long live the World Trade, long live the King, yo. I'm from the Empire State. Is blinding, girls need blinders, so they could step out of bounds quick. The sidelines is lined with casualties, sipping like casually, they gradually become worse. Don't fight the apple eve, caught up in the in crowd. Now you're in style, and in the winter gets cold, ain't born with your skin out. City of sin is a pity on the whim. Good girls going bad, the city's filled with them. Mommy took a bus trip, now she got a bust out. Everybody ride her, just like a bus route. Hail Mary to the city, you're a virgin. And Jesus can't save you, life starts when the church in. Came here for school, graduated to the highlight. Ball players, rap stars, addicted to the limelight. MDMA got you feeling like a champion. The city never sleeps, better slip you an ambient.
Former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg working the crowd at the Palm Beach Convention Center. Florida votes in its primary on March 17th. We're watching Super Tuesday results here on C-SPAN, taking your phone calls and waiting for 2 more live candidate events. Joe Biden is in Baldwin Hills Rec Center in Los Angeles, and he is watching those results in that biggest prize of the evening. Here's an interesting tweet from one of his campaign workers, whose name happens to be Simone Sanders, but this is the Biden campaign. Arrived at Roscoe's in Los Angeles with no wins, walked in with Virginia, then walked out with North Carolina and Alabama. That's the Biden campaign. And Bernie Sanders is also on our schedule for tonight from Champlain Valley Exposition in Vermont, Essex Junction, Vermont. We'll be bringing that to you live when the senator goes to the podium. And until then, we'll be taking some of your telephone calls. Steve Scully has been watching the results in the other states that have been coming in. Steve, what do you have for us?
Susan, some early numbers in Texas. This is going to be an interesting race, the second biggest prize in Super Tuesday in terms of delegates. And keep in mind, it's all about delegates. Certainly you want to win, but you want to accumulate the 1,991 delegates to get the nomination on the first ballot. Some early numbers from Texas showing that Senator Bernie Sanders is currently ahead. This is what 20% of the vote now in Texas. Senator Sanders at 27%, but former Vice President Joe Biden a close second at 20%, almost 21%. Senator Warren reaching the threshold of 15%. She's at 18.7%. and Michael Bloomberg, who spent an enormous amount of money in Texas as well as time, right now with 20% of the vote in at 17.7% of the vote. That is in Texas. In Alabama, it has already been declared where former Vice President Joe Biden is the winner in Alabama with 9% now in, followed by Senator Sanders, who is a very distant second at only 19%, Senator Warren, and then Michael Bloomberg. In Massachusetts, this is also a very interesting race. It is the home state of Senator Elizabeth Warren and also where Michael Bloomberg was born, just outside of Boston. Here are some numbers with 4% from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Senator Sanders at nearly 31% of the vote, followed by Senator Warren, very close second at 30.2%. Former Vice President Joe Biden at 25.5%, almost 26%, and Michael Bloomberg at 8.3%. And then finally, in North Carolina, where the race was called just after the polls closed in North Carolina, former Vice President Joe Biden has been declared the winner with almost 31% of the vote in North Carolina. And again, you just saw Texas with an update in the numbers there. As you mentioned, Susan, Essex Junction, Vermont is where the Bernie Sanders campaign is and also where Eliza Collins is tonight. She is covering the story for the Wall Street Journal. And so, Eliza, at first blush, what is the headline from the Sanders campaign?
Well, they are not pleased with the results out of Virginia and North Carolina in particular. Those are two delegate-rich states where Sanders had hoped to do better. Those were not states that they were necessarily banking on winning, but the fact that both were called so quickly for Joe Biden was not good news for the Sanders campaign. He had limited time, as do all the candidates, and he did spend some of that campaigning in both states, holding multiple events. So, that is not great news. There is a whole bunch of states, as you said, that are still being counted where Sanders does look to be ahead or competitive. So it's definitely still a positive vibe here, but the Virginia and North Carolina news is a blow to the Sanders campaign because they do have so many delegates.
And as you talk to people inside the Sanders campaign, is there a sense that the momentum shifted over the last 48 hours with the withdrawal of Senator Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, their endorsements, and now these wins in states like Alabama, North Carolina, and Virginia for former Vice President Biden?
Yesterday we were talking with the deputy campaign manager who said they were not nervous. They had no plans to change their strategy. This was something they expected to happen, maybe not exactly the way it did the same day with everyone consolidating, but they did expect the centrist wing of the party to consolidate, to try to stop him. There was some hope, in fact, that would actually help Sanders kind of in a way that people felt like it was being, frankly, rigged against him. Now, we're not quite sure how that's panning out. These early results in states that Sanders had hoped to play in where Biden is doing better don't look great for Sanders, but they are still pretty hopeful. He is doing well in a lot of states, and they're really banking on California here, which has the most delegates of any state in the country. He was up by a lot there. They've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and that state looks like that could really help boost him back up for these other losses.
More than 400 delegates in California. Final question for you. What's the calendar like for Senator Sanders in his home state of Vermont tonight? What's next on his schedule?
He has not publicly advised much at all. He has one event that is public next week in Illinois on next Tuesday when a whole new set of states will be set to vote. The campaign says there will be states coming up, but they were reevaluating when we asked them about everybody consolidating on the sort of center of the party. They said, let's just get through Super Tuesday before talking about changing any strategy. So I expect to see some calendar announcements likely tomorrow or Thursday. But as of now, the only public thing is Illinois next week.
Eliza Collins, she is in Essex Junction, Vermont, where the Sanders campaign is tonight, and they are warming up the crowd. Thank you very much for being with us. You're reporting online at WSJ.com.
Thanks so much.
And Susan, one other point in terms of the calendar. We just got the schedule for the Biden campaign. We know that this weekend, the former vice president is going to be in St. Louis, Missouri, and Jackson, Mississippi. So you can see where the Biden campaign is trying to keep its eye on the primaries that follow tonight, Super Tuesday. Susan?
Thanks, Steve. One thing we keep seeing on Twitter from California are people reporting long lines at polling places. As an example, here is one person who is reporting how they're distributing water to the over 500 students currently at line, at UCLA waiting to vote. Many are first-time voters, she tweets, and have waited for over 3 hours in line. From California, the big prize for tonight's Super Tuesday contest with 415 delegates at stake. While we're waiting for more results and for our next candidate event, our phone lines are open, and we have split the lines this way this evening because it's a majority Democrat story tonight that we've got a line for Democratic callers, 202-748-8920, and all others, Republicans, Independents, Undecideds, 202-748-8921. Next up is Jana in Birmingham, Alabama, on that others line. Who's your candidate, Jana?
Yes, good evening. How you doing? I've decided to support Elizabeth Warren, and I'm hoping that all of the women all over America do the same thing. Let's send Elizabeth Warren to the White House so that we can clean America up. Women, fathers, brothers, do the same thing. All the candidates are great, and we appreciate everyone for all the effort that they've done for this country, especially those who have stood up. But we especially need to send Elizabeth Warren to the White House. Everybody, let's rally together and let's vote for Elizabeth Warren because she's the person to get the job done.
Jana, did you vote today? Or did you early vote?
Yes, I did.
What was it like at the polls?
Yes, I did. I apologize.
What was it like at the polling place today? How busy was it?
It wasn't as busy as it should have been in the state of Alabama. Alabama really needs to do a whole lot better. I'm looking at the numbers in the state of Alabama. They're extremely low compared to other states. We all need to do a better job at getting to the polls and casting our votes. It should be higher than what we're seeing according to other states, much, much higher. But I voted for Elizabeth Warren, not because she's a female, but she's the one to get the job done in order for us to rebalance this country again.
Thank you, Jana, for your call tonight. Appreciate it. Patrick, up next, Chicago, Democrat. And who is your candidate among the Democrats?
Yes, hi. I'm supporting Elizabeth Warren. I'm hoping that she can gain enough delegates when it's time for me to vote on March 17th. But I've been behind her ever since she entered the race, and I'm hoping she can pull through.
What do you like about Elizabeth Warren?
I really like how she is on stage. I'm actually a mass shooting survivor from Northern Illinois University from February 14th, 2008. So she seems to be strong on the NRA, and also with her voting record in the Senate, I really appreciate all of her votes, and I'm looking for someone that is strong enough to beat the NRA.
Were you? Can you tell us a little bit of your story? Were you injured in that?
Yes, I was one of the 21 injured in that shooting. I lost 5 of my classmates, and since then I've met with survivors from Parkland, Las Vegas, Sandy Hook parents, Aurora Movie Theater, and we formed a tight bond. And just watching these young people get out from March for Our Lives from Parkland gives me hope that we can make a better change in our world so whatever happened to me doesn't happen again in this country.
Have you recovered from your injuries?
Yes, I've recovered from my injuries. I still have a couple of PTSD issues with loud noises and things like that, but I'm just hoping that, like I had said, no one else goes through what I did.
And did you go back to school again?
Yes, I did. I went back to school a week after they reopened campus, and I completed and I got my degree, and I'm happily working in my field. So it turned out pretty good for me.
Well, thank you for calling tonight. Thanks for telling us about your story, and good luck to you, Patrick. Chicago, Illinois. Back to Steve Scully for more results.
And what a story. Susan, thank you very much. Some new results from a couple of key primaries in the South, beginning in Tennessee, a state that is too close to call with only 7% reporting. Senator Bernie Sanders is currently in the lead, but very narrowly at just over 24.2%, closely followed behind by former Vice President Joe Biden and Michael Bloomberg, making a mark in Tennessee, a very close third, followed by Senator Elizabeth Warren. That's in the Tennessee Democratic primary. Of course, Nashville being hit hard by that tornado that killed 22 people, and some of the voting in Nashville was extended. In Texas, again, a state that is too close to call, but Senator Sanders is holding on to his lead with nearly 29% of the vote, followed by former Vice President Biden at 22.3%. This is with just over 20% reporting. Michael Bloomberg coming in third. He has about 121,000 votes. And Elizabeth Warren at about 90,000 votes, or 13.9%. That's in Texas. In Arkansas, we also have the numbers there as well. It is too close to call, where the former Vice President Joe Biden is holding on to a lead with nearly 30% of the vote, followed by Michael Bloomberg at 22.5%, Senator Sanders at 18%, and Senator Warren at 8.7%. And speaking of Senator Warren, in her home state of Massachusetts, she has moved up with some new numbers in that state, but Bernie Sanders still holding on to a very narrow lead, just over 29% for Senator Sanders, 29.2% for former Vice President Joe Biden. So this race could be too close to call for a while. Elizabeth Warren, the home state senator, coming in a close third, and Michael Bloomberg, as we mentioned earlier, from Boston, a distant fourth at 9.4%. Susan?
Thanks very much, Steve. Former California Governor Jerry Brown is going for the canine crowd tonight with his tweet encouraging people out to the polls. Let's take a look. This election is awfully important, he says in a picture with his dogs here in Colusa. We're on it. Former Governor Jerry Brown. And back to your telephone calls on this Super Tuesday evening. Next up is Timothy, who's watching us in New Florence, Pennsylvania, on the other line. Who is your candidate, Timothy?
Well, I'm not real sure, because I like what Mike Bloomberg is proposing with the majority of his plans. You know, many people say that he is, just another rich billionaire. But I think the one thing that I'd like to point out here is in 2016, President Trump said he was self-funded, and yet I was a part of Trump's email campaign newsletter. Every email down at the bottom of his messages all had to donate to the Trump campaign. So was he really self-funded? I doubt it. I'm a part of Mike Bloomberg's mail newsletter, and that's not there.
And what issues are most important to you, Timothy?
Well, I think climate change, gun safety, I think these are all very important issues. I stand on the side of pro-life, and that is one big thing that I disagree with Bloomberg on, is this whole pro-choice movement. I feel that abortion equates to murder.
Thank you very much for your call from New Florence, Pennsylvania. We're getting word that Bernie Sanders is expected at 9:05 Eastern time. That is about 7 minutes from right now. Let's take a look at what's happening at his event headquarters in Essex Junction, Vermont. He's had a number of speakers at the podium working the crowd before he gets up there. And then out to Los Angeles at the Joe Biden location. Crowd is much bigger than we looked at when we looked in earlier, and we don't have any time yet from that campaign as to when the former vice president is expected to speak, but as you can see, the crowd is definitely gathering. Going to go back to telephone calls. Next up is Jimmy, who is in Dobson, North Carolina, a Democrat. And who is your candidate, Jimmy?
Elizabeth Warren.
And why do you like Elizabeth Warren?
Well, she doesn't seem to be as much against gun control and the sanctuary cities, and more for the things that people in my area, small town North Carolina, we don't like socialism. We don't like open borders. We don't like gun control. We don't want higher taxes. We don't like sanctuary cities. We want somebody for law and order. So many of the politicians want to be against her officers and ICE. And I'm just from small town in North Carolina, and that's kind of what I believe in.
Okay, thank you for calling tonight on C-SPAN. Good to hear your voice. The Associated Press is reporting that a judge in Tennessee has extended Super Tuesday voting hours in Nashville and the surrounding county after a tornado devastated the area, a Democratic Party spokesperson says, including the loss of life in that area after the tornadoes hit yesterday. We're going to take our next telephone call, which is from Gina, who is in Amherst, Massachusetts, a Democrat. So who's your candidate, Gina?
Hi there. there. Thank you for C-SPAN. Thanks for taking my call. I actually am registered unenrolled in Massachusetts, but as an unenrolled affiliate, you can vote in either primary, and I'm left-leaning, so I consider myself progressive. So I was really conflicted this morning. I don't really like Biden, and I didn't want him to win, but at the same time, I also wanted to vote for the candidate that I personally backed, and that was Andrew Yang. So I stuck with voting for Andrew Yang, and part of the reason that was not because I thought he would win, because obviously he is out of the race now, but it's more to take a stand for the platforms that he encompassed in his campaign. So universal basic income, ranked choice voting, and smart, sensible solutions for climate change, and a lot of the other issues that we're facing in today's world. And, it's really hard. I also liked Bernie, and I also like Elizabeth Warren, but I really had to go with my heart on this one.
So, as you know, Mr. Yang is now a political commentator on cable news, but what are you hoping his future will be?
I'm hoping that he'll be able to position himself to be able to continue raising awareness about his policies, or not his necessarily, but the policies that he's passionate about, so universal basic income and voting and election reform, and a lot of the other issues that he cares about.
Okay. Thank you for your call, Gina, from Amherst, Massachusetts. Steve Scully's got some more results for us from Maine, Tennessee, Texas, and Massachusetts, where our last caller was from. Steve?
And Susan, what a difference from the Iowa caucuses, where it took days, still sorting out the results from Iowa and that caucuses. We're getting a lot of quick numbers tonight, though, including in Maine, some new numbers with about 8% reporting. The former Vice President Joe Biden holding on to a narrow lead with just over 36% of the vote, followed by Senator Bernie Sanders. He's hovering at around 34%. Michael Bloomberg at 14%, and Elizabeth Warren from the neighboring state at 11.2%. In Tennessee, as you mentioned, some of the voting continued because of the tornadoes that hit overnight. Former Vice President Joe Biden, with 13% of the vote from Tennessee, is holding on to a lead. He has about 40,000 votes, almost 41,000 votes, compared to nearly 36,000 for Senator Sanders. Michael Bloomberg, also a close third, with just over 35,000 votes, and Senator Elizabeth Warren in Tennessee with nearly 15,000 votes. That translates for her to just under 10%. In Texas, the second biggest prize on this Super Tuesday, the numbers in that state, this race has not been called. 23% of the vote now in. Senator Sanders holding on to his lead with nearly 28.5% of the vote, followed by former Vice President Joe Biden at 22.5%. Michael Bloomberg again crossing that 15% threshold at nearly 9%. At 24%, Michael Bloomberg coming in a distant fourth. As we said earlier, Susan, all of the numbers, all of the speeches tonight are available on our website at cspan.org.
We're looking at tweets from some of the journalists covering this campaign. Yamiche Alcindor, who is with PBS, writes this: Biden rode his big win in South Carolina straight into North Carolina. He won 50% of black voters in North Carolina. Sanders got 25% of black voters. And Bloomberg only got 12% of black voters. Theme here is, again, black voters who take in lots of info pick Biden most. And also this from the Associated Press on Colorado. Bernie Sanders wins the Democratic presidential primary in Colorado, according to them, called at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time about 4 minutes ago. Back to telephone calls. Next up is Nicholas, who's watching us in Lexington, Kentucky, on our other line. Who's your candidate, Nicholas?
Definitely Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont.
And why do you like Senator Sanders?
I think that he's both the most consistent candidate in terms of working for the working class and the poor and advocating social change for historically oppressed groups. And I think he's the most electable. I think that working class families across the United States relate to him. His message is genuine, and he's been consistent for day one. And populism ultimately wins over any ideological bent.
What would a Trump-Sanders campaign look like in your eyes?
It would definitely be close, as any candidacy would. But ultimately, I think that there will be a lot of spending by the RNC that will try to attack Bernie Sanders in disingenuous ways. But that ultimately, Sanders' consistency working for the working class will make him a viable candidate.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Lexington, Kentucky. Next up from York, Maine is Cam, also on our other line tonight. Hey, Cam, you're on.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. And who's your candidate?
My candidate is Donald Trump.
And why do you like President Trump?
I believe at his root cause, he's an American first guy. I don't believe that he would ever do anything to, hurt this country. At the end of the day, he's caring about the people.
Okay, thank you. Did you vote today?
I'm actually out of the state now, but I will definitely be there in November.
Okay, thank you for calling tonight from hometown York, Maine. I'm not sure where he is on the road. Next phone call is from Gibsonton, Florida, and this is Sebastian. Florida votes on the 17th. Who are you going to vote for?
Hey, I'm planning to vote for Bernie Sanders. I think he gives the Democratic Party a best chance to win. I know a lot of people don't believe so, or believe like Mike Bloomberg might win or Joe Biden, but I think it's about policy. And I think he's been having the same ideas on his policy since he entered his career, marching along with Martin Luther King. And he's had these crazy ideas that are on the side of the working class, of communities of color, and the environment. And so with that, having these ideas since the start of his career all the way to 2020, I think based on the policy and the personality and the individual who Bernie is, I think he can overcome anything Trump might throw at him. And I think it's just a sense of community and a movement that gives us all hope that we didn't get from the Obama administration. And I think as the RNC supported the extreme movements of Donald Trump, I think the DNC should also not try to throw more obstacles in Bernie's way, but support him and move him towards a better position to beat Donald Trump, because if it's a battle on policy, and that's what it is, then Bernie has it all the way.
Thanks for your call. You can see the crowd is quite revved up in Essex Junction, Vermont. We were told that Senator Sanders would be out at 5 minutes past the hour. It's about almost 8 minutes after, and we expect him shortly. In the interim, let's return to Steve Scully for more results.
And Susan, as you know, these candidates for office are always on time, as anyone who watches the C-SPAN network. So let's look at some new results from Texas. The race has not been called, but Senator Bernie Sanders, there are, by the way, 228 delegates at stake in Texas. Well, let's go to Oklahoma, because that has been called. Joe Biden has been, we'll go back to Texas. Okay. Senator Bernie Sanders at 28.9% for Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden at 22.5%, Michael Bloomberg at 19.1%, and Senator Warren at 13.3%. Now let's go to Oklahoma, the state that has been called for former Vice President Joe Biden. In Oklahoma, there are just over 30 delegates at stake. This is with 47% of the vote now in. Former Vice President Biden at 35.7%, followed by Senator Bernie Sanders at 24%. Michael Bloomberg, again, getting delegates if these numbers continue to hold, at 15.1%. And then finally in Arkansas, where there are 31 delegates at stake in that state, no winner yet declared, but former Vice President Biden is ahead with just a small percentage reporting from Arkansas, followed by Bernie Sanders. Michael Bloomberg, a very close third at 20.2%. And so as some of these numbers come in, we're beginning to see the Bloomberg campaign looking to pick up delegates. Again, that 15% threshold that would qualify for delegates. The big contest tonight, as you mentioned earlier, Susan, is in California. And we should point out that those results could be slow in coming in, because 60% of the vote in California was early voting or absentee ballots. One other note from the exit polls from the networks: 3 in 10 voters in 12 of the Super Tuesday states today made their decision over the last 48 to 72 hours.
Thank you, Steve. And Ruby Kramer is with BuzzFeed, and here's her tweet. She writes, nobody gets out the vote like Bernie Sanders, says T.J. Donovan, the Attorney General of Vermont, just now in Burlington. So far tonight, we are seeing the first big test of that case come in with disappointing early results for Sanders and his movement. Let's take our next telephone call. It's from Tennessee. Aaron is watching us in Old Hickory, Tennessee, a Democrat. Who's your candidate, Aaron?
It's Bernie Sanders.
And what do you like about Senator Sanders?
Oh, he's just been consistent his entire political career, and that really enthuses me, as well as his policies really enthuses me. And I would just like to say, today I voted. My house had no power. My polling location had no power. And I want to thank all of the volunteers that helped this primary go through.
Yeah, how are the things in your neighborhood overall?
Luckily, it passed us very, very closely, but it was a scary night for sure.
I'm sure. How many people got out to vote in your neighborhood, do you think? Were there other people at the polls?
Yes, there was definitely in line, but that was mainly because of all of the problems that came from not having electricity at the time.
Sure. Hey, let me ask you something. And we don't have a final tally in your state, but the results right now, according to AP, with 22% reporting, it's pretty close between Joe Biden at 30%, Bloomberg at 22% in your state, and Bernie Sanders at 24%. Why do you think your state is more evenly divided?
I really think it's a lot of Republicans switching parties, honestly. And I mean, my family has been split since the beginning, and it's a lot of younger people wanting change and a lot of older people wanting to go back to the status quo.
Okay, well, good luck to you and your neighbors recovering from that tornado yesterday. Thanks for taking the time to call in today.
No problem. Thank you.
Next up is Michael in Fort Lauderdale. Democrat, you're on.
Yes. I've been a lifelong Democrat voter, and I'm kind of up in the air between Sanders and Trump. I really like what Trump has done in the last few years, building the wall. My whole point is just like a national system, socialism, you know. We just need to keep it up and keep America doing good, keep America on its track. Don't need to really worry about other countries. We just need to pay attention more what America wants and America needs.
And do you see that either Bernie Sanders or President Trump could deliver the kind of America that you envision?
Well, so far Trump's doing good, but I think he could do better. I think he should steer away from Israel, because Israel's put us in many world wars and other little conflicts. That's not America's problem.
Okay, thanks, Michael, for your call. This is another tweet about California. If California breaks late for Biden, says Elliot Morris, like the rest of Super Tuesday states look to be doing, I think we're ending the night with a plus 50 delegate lead for Biden. And next up is Steve Scully with more results.
Susan, we're getting some numbers from Minnesota. Of course, this is a state that Amy Klobuchar had hoped to win. She withdrew from the race surprisingly yesterday, traveling down to Dallas to endorse Joe Biden. We carried it live last night, and with a very small percent of the vote now in for Minnesota, former Vice President Joe Biden has an early lead at just over 42%, followed by Senator Bernie Sanders hovering at around 28%, Elizabeth Warren at 13.7%, and Michael Bloomberg at 10.3%. As you mentioned earlier, the networks have called Colorado for Senator Bernie Sanders. In Tennessee, with now 26% of the vote now in, former Vice President Joe Biden is holding on to a lead, just over 30%, followed about 24% for Senator Sanders. Michael Bloomberg, again crossing that threshold, getting delegates if these numbers continue to hold at 22.2%, and Elizabeth Warren at 9.4%. We keep going back to Massachusetts because so much at stake for Senator Warren, and speculation, will she stay in the race or withdraw if she does not win the Massachusetts primary? Right now she is in third according to the latest numbers, and they're all on our website at cspan.org. Susan?
Thank you, Mr. Scully. Next up is Mike in Sun City, California on the other line. Mike, who is your candidate?
President Trump. I'm a retired social studies teacher, and what I do is I always vote against the elite liberal media. So I blindly vote the Republican line because they do serve as the offensive team of the left, and the Democrats serve as the defensive team of the left. What's very telling, though, is that the lurch to the left that the Democrats have taken, and how much the elite liberal media wants to obscure that, is going to be very telling, and they're going to carry a lot of baggage. Because just case in point would be the fact that one of the debates where one of the journalists asked where they stand on illegal aliens getting free health care courtesy of the American taxpayer. and they all agreed with that. Every one of them put their hand up, Biden included. So those extreme positions like that, where they don't put the interests of the American people first, I think is going to serve as sort of an undercurrent to undermine their contentions and their platform. And what President Trump, no matter what you say, they've thrown everything at him. So what else are you going to throw at him? But the bottom line is, America intuitively understands that he loves America and he loves American people, and that's why I predicted the 2016 election, and I knew it was going to come down to the working class white families in the Rust Belt, because they've been forgotten by the Democrats in terms of their political philosophy. So, so there's an intuitive factor that's going on, and versus an intelligence factor. The Democrats in the West, they only understand the intelligence factor. They never understand the intuitive factor, because they're used to pontificating from the top down instead of identifying from the bottom up.
Thanks, Mike, watching us in Sun City, California. You just saw the two dueling rallies on two different coasts, Vermont and California, and we're waiting for either of the candidates to reach the podium, and we can bring you live coverage of that. Kai Rusdahl might be a familiar name from Marketplace Radio. He's the host of that. He's in California and voting today. Poll workers at my location, he tweets, say machines are being glitchy. My wait so far is 25 minutes, but the line is moving. Technical issues lead to long lines for California voters, says he. Next up is Miranda, who is in Syracuse, New York, on our other line. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for taking my phone call. And at this moment, I'm undecided as to who I'm going to vote for in the primary, because at first I was a supporter of Warren, but as I've been watching the debates, I'm not hearing how they're going to pay for it and how they're going to do everything that they're going to say. That they're saying they're doing. I'm just not hearing it.
So how will you make your decision?
I'm going to continue to go on their websites, check it out, because maybe I might get more information than what I've been seeing and watching your show, and see if I can find out who is going to be the best candidate, because I'm not voting for Trump. I don't like what he's doing. It seems though he's trigger happy, and every time someone says something that he doesn't like, he calls that fake news. And you really shouldn't be calling someone that you don't know a liar.
And what's your number one issue for you, Miranda?
People with disabilities, because I'm not hearing what they're going to do to improve the lives of people with disabilities, and I'm legally blind, and I'm having a problem getting the services that I need, and that's one of my issues is that what can we do to make sure that people with disabilities get the services that they need? Because it seems though if you have a disability and you're a low income, it is difficult to get the services that you need. And people with disabilities, we face challenges, and a lot of us are working our hardest to be able to face those challenges and deal with them and overcome them.
Miranda, thanks so much for participating tonight. Lots of good stories from our callers. We appreciate you sharing them with us. Steve, you've got some more results from us. Where from?
I do, and also I want to point out we did cover Tulsi Gabbard, one of the other Democrats still in this race. She's in Detroit tonight, and a chance to see that later tonight also on our website at cspan.org. But let's look at some of the races, at least a couple that are too close to call. Texas with 228 delegates at stake. Senator Sanders now with 25% of the vote in from Texas, holding on to a lead, but former Vice President Joe Biden coming in a surprisingly strong second based on some early poll numbers that had him way down before the race changed over the last 48 to 72 hours. Michael Bloomberg at 19% and Senator Warren in Texas at 13.3%. In Oklahoma with 37 delegates at stake, and again, it's all about the delegates for these candidates. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been declared the winner. That's followed by Senator Bernie Sanders at 24.3%, and Michael Bloomberg right now just at the cusp at 14.9%, needs to get 15% to get delegates. In Colorado, with 67 delegates, as you said earlier, the AP had declared Bernie Sanders the winner. And based on some early projections, Senator Sanders picking up Colorado with a portion of the 67 delegates. Michael Bloomberg coming in second in Colorado. This is the strongest showing he's had so far based on some early numbers in Colorado, followed by former Vice President Joe Biden. And finally, in Minnesota, with 75 delegates at stake, this is again a state that former Vice President Joe Biden hoping that the Amy Klobuchar endorsement will help him. at 47%, followed by Senator Sanders, and then Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg, a distant third and fourth. Susan?
Thank you, Steve. Next up is John, Port Orange, Florida. That state's voting on the 17th. Who's your candidate?
That would be Bernie Sanders.
And why do you like Bernie Sanders?
Well, I like the idea that he's going to bolster the unions. Being a union worker myself, as a matter of fact, I'm traveling right now. I'm up in Alabama working at Browns Ferry nuclear plant. I enjoy what he says when he wants to get people ahead and wants to get people back into the union, make the union strong. My biggest hope is that whichever Democrat does get in, and hopefully they will win the presidency, that they will reinstate the tax codes for the itemizations that we all lost. Because when we travel, we have our bills back home, and we have to travel. We got to pay bills on the road, and it's not fair that we cannot itemize our motels, our food, our fuel miles, everything that was itemization that we were able to do previous before Mr. Trump got his hands into the tax codes. And he basically, I think he did this to backknife the unions, because he knows most union men do travel for a living. And it's an unfortunate thing. There's not enough union work at home, and hopefully Mr. Sanders can take care of that issue. But at the same time, I will continue to travel, but we do need our itemizations back. It's hurting us very deeply. And myself and every other union member I speak to, it hurts us deeply. When we lose $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in itemizations, that's a hard nut to crack. I mean, and it's getting very monotonous. It's making it harder to travel to make a living.
John, how many nights a year do you spend on the road?
That would range anyways from 150 to 220.
Wow, that's a lot of time away from home. And what kind of work do you do?
Well, I'm working up in nuclear power plants. We do nuclear shutdowns. I travel the outages. I'm up currently right now. I'm up in Alabama, right outside Athens, Alabama, where the Browns Ferry nuclear power station is. And from there, then I plan to move on to up to Tennessee, and we have Sequoia and Watts Bar up that ways, which I'm a member of that local 846 Chattanooga, Tennessee, LIUNA.
Thank you, John, for calling in tonight from home of Port Orange, Florida, which it sounds like it doesn't see all that often. Steve, you have a statement from Mayor Bloomberg.
Susan, of course, Mayor Bloomberg not winning so far any of the states in Super Tuesday, having spent close to $500 million in advertising, and Kevin Sheekey, who is the campaign manager, issuing a statement just a moment ago. Let me read part of what he said. We launched our campaign exactly 100 days ago. In that incredibly short time, we have built a nationwide coalition focused on building a better future for America, adding that tonight only 1/3 of the delegates will be allotted. As Mike said this evening, no matter how many delegates we win tonight, we have done something no one else thought was possible. In just 3 months, we've gone from 1% in the polls to being a contender for the Democratic nomination, adding that our #1 priority remains defeating Donald Trump in November. So you can read between the lines. He will be picking up some delegates. Does not appear, based on the early numbers, that Michael Bloomberg will win any of the states, and so possibly a reassessment coming up in the days ahead. But we're getting an indication that the Bloomberg campaign will continue to be on tonight based on the statement from Kevin Sheekey that was sent to us just a moment ago.
Thank you. And speaking of campaigns continuing, we also have this tweet from a reporter who is following the Warren campaign. And she writes that, this is Hannah Trudeau, Elizabeth Warren has post-Super Tuesday itinerary lined up. She says this is new. Lansing, Michigan, Phoenix, Arizona, and Boise, Idaho over the next few days. And speaking of Arizona, our next caller is from Arizona, Trent in Tucson, a Democrat. Trent, who's your candidate?
So I'm actually looking to go for Joe Biden coming up in the election, just because I feel like at the end of the day, all of us Democrats just don't want to see Trump in that seat in the Oval Office again. And although I'm 21 years old, I agree with a lot of what Bernie says, and a bunch of my friends do. Like, actually, my brother runs the Democratic Socialists of America up at New York University. But I really just don't think America is ready for that, extreme of a change, going from Trump, who's on the right, all the way to the Democratic Socialist of Bernie.
And why do you think Joe Biden will be a good competitor?
I feel like he's in the middle. I mean, at the end of the day, he calls himself a moderate, and Buttigieg, when he was in all the debates, he was saying that he really wants to try and unite the Democratic Party and at the end of the day beat Trump. I was a big Buttigieg fan, and he endorsed Biden, and I feel like at the end of the day, he's right in endorsing Biden, and he gives us the best chance at taking down Trump and having someone else in the Oval Office.
Thanks for your call. This tweet, is from Alex Wagner with The Circus, a journalist for that organization. He writes, man, does Joe Biden owe a debt of gratitude to Whip Clyburn? That's referring to the South Carolina congressman whose endorsement before Saturday's primary there seemed to tip the scales very much in favor of the former vice president. Next up is Brendan in Abington, Massachusetts, Democrat. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you. Please turn your TV volume down so we don't get feedback, and go ahead.
Yep. So actually, I was an independent in the 2016 election, and I've now declared as a Democrat in this election, and I am all for Bernie Sanders. And that's mostly because two things, and for me, it's about integrity and accountability. And if you look at Bernie Sanders' track record, I mean, everyone knows he has the integrity. He was there marching along with everyone during the civil rights movement. He's been fighting for these issues his entire life. It shows, all the videos show it, all of his speeches show it. From like the 60s to now, he's been fighting for the middleman. He's been caring about the average American. The other big thing for me is accountability, in the sense that someone like Trump or Bloomberg are running out of their wallets. They have no accountability that they're held to other than the fact that they have their wallets. Whereas someone like Bernie Sanders, if he slips up, if he messes up, he loses money. He loses fundraising. He loses the thing that keeps him going, which is love and respect from his supporters and the money that they're supplying him to continue in his pursuit for the presidency. I was for Bernie in 2016. I'm for Bernie now. I hope he isn't unfairly robbed of the election.
Okay, thank you, Brendan, Abington, Massachusetts. A crowd's trying to keep up its momentum there in Vermont while the senator continues to delay his appearance to make his address tonight. Seeing one of the reporters we checked in with earlier, Ruby Kramer, who's covering the campaign, writes this, that one of his spokesmen is talking to reporters and said, if you turn off your television at 10 p.m., that's Eastern time, I presume, tonight, you will wake up to a different race, Bernie spokesman tells reporters here in Burlington, as supporters wait for Sanders to speak. Presumably, the campaign is still watching those results coming in before the senator frames his remarks to his supporters. Next up is Malcolm, Brooklyn, Democrat. Hi, Malcolm. Who's your candidate?
I'm a supporter of Senator Warren or Senator Sanders.
And why do you like them? What's important to you?
Well, after corruption, the environment, healthcare, and education.
Okay, and how viable are they?
I think completely viable. I think people of my generation and younger especially are fed up with the cost of their health insurance and getting no services in exchange for that, and also are stuck in debt to their student loans.
All right, thanks for calling in tonight. Appreciate your participation. Steve, more results from you, please.
3 states that are too close to call, and in Maine, with only 150 votes, fewer than 150 votes separating Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders. You can see the numbers on your screen, followed by Senator Elizabeth Warren at 15.1% and Michael Bloomberg at 12%. Also in Tennessee, and we've been talking about Tennessee because of that tornado that hit overnight, killing more than 20 people in the Nashville area, and the voting was extended in parts of Nashville. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been holding on to a lead, but this race has not yet been called. About half of the vote now reporting. Just about 85,000 votes for the former vice president, followed by 60,000 votes for Senator Bernie Sanders. Michael Bloomberg at 47,000 or 19.4%. Senator Warren coming in a distant fourth. And then finally in Texas, another race that's still too close to call, but Senator Sanders continuing to hold on to his lead with about 6% reporting, followed by former Vice President Biden, Michael Bloomberg, and then Senator Elizabeth Warren rounding out at 13.2%. A lot more numbers to come from Texas, a race that has not yet been called. Susan?
Thanks very much. The very first candidate to speak tonight was Tulsi Gabbard, and her remarks are about 18 minutes. We're going to show you what she had to say, And if either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders come out live, we will interrupt that. And if we have to do that, it's all available on our website. So let's listen to Tulsi Gabbard on her Super Tuesday evening.
Major combat veteran, Congresswoman, future President Tulsi Gabbard.
Aloha. How are you? Good to see you. Thank you very much. Aloha. How are you? Good to see you. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Aloha. Nice to see you. Thank you. Have a seat. Hi. Aloha. Thank you so much. It's great to be back here in Detroit. You got it going on. I don't know how many of you know this, but I actually have roots here in Michigan. Pretty deep roots. I want to introduce you to my mother, Carol Gabbard, who is there in the back. She grew up here in Michigan, Grand Rapids, went to East Grand Rapids High, went to University of Michigan. Before my dad came and off her feet, took her far into the Pacific Ocean to some little island called American Samoa. So she's having a blast being back here. I'm so happy that you're able to be here with us tonight. Thank you so much. You know what's so incredible to me that I every single day am grateful for? Throughout this entire campaign, we've been campaigning now for over a year, all across the country. It is the privilege and the honor of being able to spend time with people just like you everywhere. People who are coming from all different backgrounds, across party lines, across racial lines, ethnic, religious, across all walks of life, coming together, being bound together by a singular motivation. It's a motivation, thank you, sir, that's based in love. Love of country, love and care for each other, a deep concern for the challenges that we face, the deeply rooted challenges that go beyond the superficial, hyper-partisan bickering of the day, but really deeply rooted in recognizing how do we stand together as Americans to solve problems, to solve the problems that are impacting every one of us, our families, our children, our parents, our loved ones. This is what binds us all together. This is what has brought you out here tonight. You could be spending your time tonight doing anything, but you're here because you care. And this is where I draw great hope and inspiration for where we can go together as a country. We recognize how divisive, unfortunately, this current political culture is that we're in, where instead of really focusing on issues, focusing on listening to the voices of people across our country, we have so many of the headlines, so much of the noise on social media, really about pitting one group of people against the other. Whether it's based on political affiliation, who you voted for, who you voted against, where you're from, what your job is, how you worship or if you worship, or even what cable news channel you watch. All of these different things adding fuel to this cancel culture that is really undermining the foundational principles of our country, where for generations we have celebrated freedoms like the freedom of speech. The freedom of speech, where just as I have a right to stand here before you, you have a right to stand and share your views, to share your principles, to run for office, to bring your ideas to the forefront in how we solve problems. We shouldn't be afraid of having diversity in those ideas. We shouldn't be afraid of the different perspectives and experiences that we bring, because it is through this dialogue, it is through our ability to see each other as fellow Americans and treat each other with respect and have these engagements where we can agree on some things, disagree on others. We can disagree without being disagreeable by staying focused on what our mission is. That if our mission is not about our own selfish interests or our own arrogance or pride or anything else, but it's really about how we can make a positive impact for each other and for our country and for our planet, then this is what lights that pathway forward for us. I read a quote from Abraham Lincoln recently that I'd never seen before that really drove this point home for me. And I've been sharing it with everybody ever since. He said, "I don't like that man. I need to know him better." Such a powerful, simple but powerful statement that really tells us how we bridge these divides, because I've been asked over and over and over again, and it's a little heartbreaking every time I'm asked from people who care so much but feel so hopeless, and ask, is it even possible? Is it possible for our country to bridge these divides when we are so torn apart? How do we get to a place where we can treat each other with respect, regardless of whether we're of the same party or another, at a time where people are casting judgment, saying, well, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to hear your ideas, I don't want to have anything to do with you because you are of the other fill in the blank. Understand how dangerous that is. If this is what we are willing to accept as America, then the truth of that speech Abraham Lincoln gave will come about, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. That will become our reality. And to me, this speaks to the pivotal moment that we have before us, that you have before you in this election, about what choice you'll make, what kind of leadership you want, what kind of future in this country you want, not only for yourselves, but for those who will come after us. What kind of message do you want to send to leaders in Washington, where unfortunately we live in a country where our government is of, by, and for the powerful elite, leaving the rest of us behind? That this vision that our founders had for us, that we would have representatives of the people whose sole mission was serving you, is far from the reality that we are struggling with today. And we can see this evident, not just in looking at the headlines. I don't know about you, but when I'm flipping through the headlines on my phone or flipping through the channels on television, what I see people talking about with the pundits and the talking heads, it is so disconnected from the conversations that I'm having in rooms like this, in small towns, big cities, east, west, north, south, people across this country who are so frustrated because your voices are not breaking through. And it's not for lack of trying. It's because the truth and your voices and the ability and desire for us to come together as Americans, setting differences aside, saying we've got to figure this out. We've got to bring about this change. We've got to solve these problems for each other. It's very telling when we face a situation where the powerful elite in Washington are not even trying to hide the fact that they're afraid of the voices of the people. That out in the open right now, you have a lot of money being spent, a lot of lobbying efforts being made in preparation for the Democratic convention, saying, well, hey, if voters in this country pick a candidate that the powerful elite don't like, we got a backup plan to overrule the voices of the people. It's not even a secret. It is blatantly being thrown in our faces. So the ball is then in our court. What are we going to do about it? Do we just lie down and be like, well, you guys got the power, we got nothing, and let them roll through? No, absolutely not. But don't let it stop there. We have to continue to speak truth to power, to continue to hold leaders accountable, to continue to remind them about the oath that every single member of Congress takes, about the first 3 words in the Constitution that we take that oath to. It doesn't say we the party, or we the powerful, or we the wealthy. It says we the people. We the people. And that means something. That means something. Our founding fathers were very intentional with those first 3 words, we the people. It is a reminder to every single one of us that in those darkest of times where you feel so hopeless, that the power in this democratic republic lies in our hands, that ultimately we the people have the responsibility, the challenge, the opportunity to determine what leaders you want working for you. That power to hire and to fire. That power to hold those leaders accountable if we choose to do so. We the people. These words are a reminder to those leaders who are sent to Washington on your behalf about who they are accountable to. We are far from this reality, but we know this is where we need to go. I start our conversation here tonight talking about this because it is at the heart of how we can actually bring about solutions to the whole laundry list of challenges and problems and concerns that impact us maybe in a very personal way, our families, that impacts our environment, our planet, that impacts the decisions and effects of what our country is doing on the global front. The consequences are very real. But unless we address what is at the heart of both our challenge that we face in this country and our opportunity to raise our voices, then we will not be able to see progress. This is the most critical thing. Too often we feel like our voices won't be heard, that we are powerless to effect change. But when we look throughout history, and we've seen monumental changes both in this country and in other countries, I think of obviously leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King, leaders like Nelson Mandela, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, leaders who recognized, I think, 2 really important things: the power of the people's voices and how essential it is that even during these darkest of times, the only way to defeat that darkness is with light. That even in these times where you feel surrounded by negativity and hatred and bigotry, discrimination, divisiveness, racism, go down the list, that our challenge and opportunity is to stand strong with the courage and strength that can only come from love to defeat that hate. It is the only thing that can. Because love is not weak. Think about people in your own life, those who you love most dearly, whether you're a parent or a child, brother, sister, spouse, partner. Think about those who you love most dearly in your life and the lengths that you would go to fight for them, for their safety, their well-being, their security. Only love can defeat hate. And this love and respect and care that we have for one another, whether we're coming together as total strangers or already coming together as friends, is rooted in this identity of who we are as Americans and what we want our nation to represent. Because this is the truth. Our nation is not defined by one person who occupies the White House. Our nation is defined by us, by the Constitution. We are America. We are America. So the opportunity is ours, and this is where I see hope for our future, because you're not alone. I guarantee you in this room here tonight, we have Republicans and Democrats, independents and libertarians. If you're coming here tonight and you're feeling maybe you're the only one who's here tonight who voted for Trump in the last election, I guarantee you you're not alone. If you're coming, right? If you're coming in here tonight saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the only Republican in a room full of Democrats, I guarantee you you're not alone. Whether you voted for Bernie or Hillary or Trump or Ron Paul or Gary Johnson, just like we are here tonight, as Americans first, standing together to put country first, there are people gathering all across this country who are doing exactly the same thing. This is how we bridge those divides and heal the divisive wounds in our country and blaze a new path forward for our country that doesn't fit into these conformed boxes that people tell us, you got to be this or that. Prejudging who we are and what we are capable of. The power is in our hands. The opportunity is ours. We cannot look back. We cannot fail. We have to carry this torch forward, if not for yourself, then for those you love and this country that we hold most dear. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here and standing with me here tonight. Thank you.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, the first of the candidates to come out tonight, speaking to her supporters. We're getting the most recent word from the Sanders campaign that they will be out sometime after 10 Eastern time, about 15 minutes from now, continuing to delay as they watch the results come in from the 14 Super Tuesday states. And we're going to continue waiting and also taking your phone calls and looking at results. I have a few journalist tweets to share with you, just to add some context to what's been going on. Alex Seitz-Wald is NBC digital reporter and tweets, one potential loser tonight is campaigns, like in general. Joe Biden had one field office in Virginia, was outspent 7-1 by Sanders and almost 100-1 by Bloomberg. In all Super Tuesday states, he had barely campaigned in any states, and yet. The Richmond Times-Dispatch puts this observation out on their feed. Joe Biden has received more votes tonight in the Virginia primary than Obama did in the 2008 primary. And then there is this from Amy Friedenberger, who writes, localities that went to Bernie Sanders: Charlottesville, University of Virginia, Harrisonburg, and naturally Floyd County. Steve Scully, you've got some more results for us?
Susan, one quick note in Alabama. We said at the top of the program a contested Senate GOP primary, and Jeff Sessions, according to the latest numbers, is locked in a close race with the former Auburn coach Tommy Tuberville. We'll have some more numbers on that in just a moment, but let's go through the presidential race. First, in Tennessee, you can add 4 states that now former Vice President Joe Biden has won, followed by Alabama, North Carolina, and Virginia. Joe Biden has been declared the winner with nearly 70% of the vote being reported in Tennessee. There are 64 delegates at stake. Senator Bernie Sanders coming in second, Michael Bloomberg third in Tennessee. To the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 91 delegates at stake in Massachusetts, and right now former Vice President Joe Biden is maintaining a lead over Senator Bernie Sanders, nearly 34% to 28% for Senator Sanders. Elizabeth Warren, this is her home state. She has won twice as the Massachusetts senator, coming in third with about a third of the vote being reported from Massachusetts, and Michael Bloomberg not qualifying for delegates in his home state. He was born just outside of Boston. In Maine, 24 delegates at stake, another race that is too close to call. Former Vice President Joe Biden, though, is holding on to a very narrow lead with about 23,000 votes compared to just under 22,000 for Senator Bernie Sanders, 34% of the vote being reported from Maine. In Texas, 228 delegates at stake. This is the second biggest prize after California, and Senator Bernie Sanders is holding on to a lead, but former Vice President Joe Biden is a surprisingly strong second in Texas. Michael Bloomberg coming in third at just under 19%. In Arkansas, there are 31 delegates at stake in Arkansas, and the numbers from the Associated Press have former Vice President Joe Biden ahead with nearly 31% of the vote compared to about 21% for Bernie Sanders, and locked into a third place contest is Michael Bloomberg, narrowly behind in Arkansas. And Minnesota, which has just been called, so this is the fifth state for former Vice President Joe Biden. He is the winner in Minnesota, 36% of the vote compared to nearly 32% for Senator Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren coming in third at 17.5%. And so that probably explains why the Sanders campaign is delaying its speeches tonight in Essex Junction, Vermont. And as you pointed out earlier, Susan, we are still waiting for former Vice President Joe Biden, who is in Los Angeles tonight. Susan?
Also watching those results probably with a bit of a smile tonight as he watches it. Dave Wasserman of Cook Political Report tweeted this: the best state of the night so far for Sanders is Colorado. But the terrible news for him, because Biden, Bloomberg, and Warren are all above 15%, his Colorado delegate haul will be fairly minuscule. And Jamie Dupree of Cox, Amy Klobuchar told voters in her home state to vote for Biden. She's at 4.5% in fifth place. Biden leads Sanders in Minnesota 35-32. Warren is viable at 17.9, and that was with 16% reporting just a little while ago. And we're going to go back to your telephone calls. Next up is Sarah, who is in Fresno, California, on our other line. Sarah, good evening. Who is your candidate?
Hi, I'm a Republican in Fresno, California, and my candidate is Donald Trump.
And why do you like the president's policies?
Well, I really feel that he has done a great job with our economy, and I live in a very liberal state, and sadly, our vote really doesn't count much here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like voting in a liberal state.
Okay.
Today, so we are a vote by mail district. However, you can still take your ballot to the polls. And I choose to do that because I like to vote on Election Day, and I like to get my little I voted sticker. But when I went to the polls today, I had to go past 4 homeless people that were living next to the library. And then when you go inside the library to vote, there's several homeless people inside just spending their day. And I feel that that is part of our policies in California has led to an extremely large homeless population. But when I was in line voting, I did notice what I would call a lot of Bernie bros. There were people in line to vote that I felt like were probably first-time voters, a lot of young men, probably between the ages of 20 and 30 years old, Hispanic. I live in a Hispanic, heavily Hispanic area. Our population is probably about 55% Hispanic in Fresno County. And when I watch the news and hear all this coverage about Joe Biden, they really push how the African American community is behind Joe. But I really feel in California, the Hispanic community is really behind Bernie Sanders. I don't know if they fully understand what socialism is and his policies, but he definitely has a strong coalition here. But as a Trump supporter, I do feel like there are people in California that follow Donald Trump and support his policies. We're a large agriculture community here in the Central Valley. We're the breadbasket of the world, and he is trying to help us here with some water issues and other things to really try to help protect our farming community, which is so vital to our economy here in the central part of California. But I've just been really happy with Trump. I don't think that we've seen all he can do for us because of our liberal policies here. Our state is just so liberal that in our state legislature, there's just maybe like a dozen Republicans. I mean, so it's just a pretty liberal area. But I do think that things are going to change in the years to come because, like I said, with the homeless, these policies that they've put in place just aren't working, and I think a change is coming. But I'm happy with Trump. A lot of my friends and family love Trump too. I have family in Michigan, and they talk about how their economy has really improved under Trump. And so I'm just really happy with him. I'm happy with, we were also voting for a congressional race. Devin Nunes, who you hear on TV all the time, he's my congressman. So we do have some Republican voices in our area, but it's interesting in California. It really has changed a lot in the last 10 years, and not for the better. I've just seen these liberal policies really take effect here, and it's scary. It's not the California that I grew up in. I'm 35 years old. I love my state. It's a beautiful place to live. I don't want to leave California, but I'm seeing so many people forced to leave our great state because it's just too expensive to live here. If you're not in Silicon Valley, making those Google paychecks, it's really hard to survive. And for the family farmers, it's just so tough. And when you look at something like a Bernie Sanders, when you talk about, death tax and all of that, you can't inherit a family farm if you're going to have to pay such high estate taxes.
Hey, Sarah, we got to run because we got a lot of callers on the line. Thank you so much for participating tonight from Fresno and giving us your analysis of your state and explaining your politics. Steve Scully, you've been watching a few Senate results on primary night. What do you have?
We have indeed. We also showed Tulsi Gabbard. She is not qualified for any delegates, not reaching that threshold, but two Senate races. Jeff Sessions, who's hoping to regain his old seat. This is the seat now won by Doug Jones, a Democrat. Tommy Tuberville, who is the former Auburn football coach, is ahead with 100% of the vote now in. He has 36.5%, followed by former Senator Sessions at nearly 32% and Bradley Byrne at 21%. So in Alabama, there will be a runoff between the former Auburn coach, Tommy Tuberville, and former Senator, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. An interesting race to watch and a seat that the Democrats hope to keep, but this is a ruby red Republican state that will be following in campaign 2020. And then on to North Carolina, who will challenge Tom Tillis. That race has been called in North Carolina. Democrat Cal Cunningham has been declared the winner with nearly 58% of the vote. Erica Smith coming in a distant second, and Trevor Fuller just at about 3.6%. But again, in North Carolina, Cal Cunningham, who will challenge Republican Tom Tillis, one of a number of key races in which Democrats and Republicans will be spending a lot of time and money on to determine who will be the next majority leader. Will it be Chuck Schumer in the majority, or will Mitch McConnell maintain his leadership in the Senate as the GOP leader? Susan?
Thank you, Steve. Karen Tumulty, who's been covering politics for quite a while, columnist for the Washington Post, had this tweet: one of the more astonishing figures in the exit poll crosstabs. Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren running even among women in Massachusetts. We're going to re-air Michael Bloomberg's comments to his supporters in Florida. He's in West Palm, preparing for the primary in Florida coming up on March 10th. His remarks are brief. We're going to listen to what he had to say and then come back and take more calls.
Thank you and good evening. It's wonderful to be here with you tonight. As some of you may know, I live on the other coast of Florida and have been there for a little over 20 years. The people here clearly love Mike Bloomberg. You know that I'm a truth teller. I don't do spin. This is the greatest country on the planet. And the greatest country on the planet deserves the greatest president. This is a very important time. It was important enough for me to get off the couch and to come out and to say to America, we can't be sentimental. This is not a time for a sentimental candidate. This is the greatest country in the world. It doesn't need a revolution. It may need a little tweaking. It does need a little tweaking. I'm a girl who realized the American dream. So did Mike Bloomberg. My husband and I lived, when our kids were in college, we lived in a studio apartment with a Murphy bed. And that wasn't so long ago. Well, it was a long time ago. 1990, to me, it was a moment. So I know what it is to be able to grab the brass ring. And there are too many people who need that opportunity. So America needs tweaking in order to give them that opportunity. But it doesn't need a revolution. We're fortunate in having someone that we can vote for in this election who is a manager, a leader, someone who has governed with grace, who brought New York City through the tragedy of 9/11, who brought New York City back after 2008, when everybody said New York City was through. And he did that because he's a genius. He sees a problem, he brings on the best people in the world, and he says to them, this is the problem. I want to fix it. And he listens to them. That's what he will do for us. We have to make sure it happens, because if we don't, the rancor in this country will rip us apart. So, for me, it is a joy, and at my stage in life, I have so few of those. It is a joy and a thrill for me to introduce a man who I respect, who I admire, and I hope will inhabit 1600 in 2021, Mike Bloomberg.
What a crowd. Thank you all for coming. Judy and I were just going to sit home tonight, her at her home, I at mine, watch a little television, have a drink or two. But I do want to thank Judge Judy. Isn't she amazing? And also a big thanks to all the elected officials and Florida leaders supporting our campaign, including Mayors Manny Diaz, Phil Levine, Bob Buckhorn, Keith James, and Congress members Ted Deutsch and Stephanie Murphy. Let's hear it for them. Now, it's great to be here in this beautiful state. I know you're not used to seeing a New Yorker in southern Florida in late winter. But unlike the president, I didn't come here to golf. Or to reveal classified information to Mar-a-Lago members. I came here because winning in November starts with Florida. And if I'm the nominee, let me make you this promise. We will beat Donald Trump here in Florida and in swing states around the country. Now, tonight the polls are still open in a number of Super Tuesday states, and as the results come in, here's what is clear. No matter how many delegates we win tonight, we have done something no one else thought was possible. In just 3 months, we've gone from 1% of the polls to being a contender for the Democratic nomination for president.
And at that point, we're going to leave Mayor Bloomberg. Bernie Sanders is at the podium in Essex Junction, Vermont.
Thank you, Vermont. You know, it's a funny thing. 31 years ago today, we won the mayoral race in Burlington, Vermont. And we won that race against all of the odds. Everybody said it couldn't be done. And when we began this race for the presidency, everybody said it couldn't be done. But tonight, I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination. And we are going to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country. We are going to win. We are going to defeat Trump because we are putting together an unprecedented grassroots, multi-generational, multiracial movement. It is a movement which speaks to the working families of this country who are sick and tired of working longer hours for low wages and seeing all new income and wealth going to the top 1%. It is a movement which says the United States will have health care for all as a human right. It is a movement that says we will bring major reforms in education, making sure that all of our kids can go to college without coming out in debt.
Congressional District, this is Duncan Hunter's seat.
Now, what makes this movement unique is we are taking on the corporate establishment. We are taking on the greed of the insurance companies. And given the existential crisis of climate change, we are saying to the fossil fuel industry, their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our country and the world. But we are not only taking, which brings young people into our political